right, I'm just going to adjust the volume before I start because my volume seems to jump past where I have it set and then it comes in overwhelming.
Disclaimer. The information and education material contained herein is meant to promote the general understanding and dialogue of GANs processing. Such information is not meant or intended to serve as a substitute for a healthcare professional's clinical training, experience, or judgment. For patients and individuals, such information is not to be a substitute for professional medical, therapeutic, or healthcare advice or counseling. For medical issues or concerns, including decisions about medications and other treatments, readers, viewers, listeners should always consult their physician or, in serious cases, seek immediate assistance from emergency personnel. Prescription information, procedures, and use of medical devices information should be undertaken only by properly trained and certified medical personnel. We specifically disclaim any warranties, express or implied, including implied warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. Such information is provided, as is, and is believed to be accurate at the time of its publishing, but it is the viewer's job to evaluate the accuracy of any information found in this presentation. Every case presented is of their own experience, applied by themselves for themselves, and it applies to their case only. Every person experiencing health problems should seek professional medical advice and consult their course of treatment with a doctor. The processes of plasma balancing described herein are a natural process which supports the body but does not replace medical advice or therapies one is already subject to.
And now, without further ado, our beautiful fellow knowledge seeker, Alex. We see your screen, Alex.
Hello, thank you very much. I would just like to welcome everybody to the North American Corona team meeting. Mark, can you just confirm the audio and video is acceptable?
Yep, it's very well. It's very good.
I want to thank everybody for attending today. It's a very special day. It's not just a beautiful Sunday in North America, but it's a beautiful Sunday all around the world. I just want to add one other point to the disclaimer, and you did bring it up before, but just to remind everybody that YouTube has announced a new procedure with respect to dissemination of information. So I just hope that everybody please respect that, and we'll stick to the topic at hand. So the topic at hand really is how the science meets the soul of man for peace. And so we're looking at all the Keshe Foundation TV groups around the world, and don't think I have enough room on this page to put them all, but they will be coming, and I'm putting as many as I can. But this is our goal. This is our overall goal. And the question is, how do we bridge this between science and the soul? And I'm going to do something a little bit different today. So before I get into that, let me just introduce the subject, please. This is the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute. The course is Plasma Science, and we are talking about basic knowing. Today's topic is botany. Maybe a little bit misleading, because we're going to talk about a variety of things related to that. My name is Alexander. I am from Canada. It is October the 3rd, 2021. And this is part of the Keshe Foundation North American Plasma Education Series. As you can see, we started last year, and it's almost been a full year. One more week and we'll be there. We started with basic teaching, and we extended that teaching into intermediate and advanced teaching, but actually all of that was basic teaching. And we've extended that not only to the North American team, but to Brazil, Italy, and the Spanish community, which is right around the world, including Spain and South America, Central America. And of course, as this is the North American team meeting, that does include Canada, US, and Mexico. And it's a very powerful team. And we're honored that we have so many international visitors as well, because we've extended this into basic understanding of the basic teaching, and we've used that as intermediate and advanced understanding. And it's still basic. That's the problem. It's still basic. And so how do we catch up to Mr. Kesh, who is racing along, and he has to race along because we have commitments. When we say we have commitments, take it any way that you want, things will change. And so how do we catch up? How do we keep up? We don't have time. And as we'll see today, we don't have time to do all this. So there have to be some tricks. And one of these tricks is basic knowing. And the part of the thing about the knowing is to know what is the status today, because what we're not talking about is the status of where we're going. And we get confused sometimes. So sometimes the best thing to do is to identify the things that we're familiar with, the things that we know, and see how that relates. And I think as we're finding out, we find that there are things that are missing. And so the basic knowing is identifying what is missing, because what is missing is not apparent, it's not physical, and it's not tangible, and it's not visible. So what is it that's missing? So as we review, there's a very, very important purpose. So I said we're going to discuss botany today, but we're going to do something a little bit different. I had to pick a title. And what has the science of botany, the main characteristic is that it classifies things. So we want to see how we're going from one side of the bridge to the other and how fast we can get across. And it just seems that the more that we know, the longer the bridge gets. So every one of us has an opportunity to cross this bridge as fast as we wish. And of course, we can go back many, many years and look at over 3,000 hours of teaching. And so this is a challenge to all the teachers, not only the teachers that we have currently, the magnificent teachers that we have all around the world, but the new teachers that will be coming on. And so this is not only for the new students, this is for the mature students, and this is also for the teachers. Take what you know, take what you can, and do it your own way. Because the fundamentals, of course, is to understand the terminology. Without the terminology, you can't talk about anything. So we find that in the plasma science, the two basic words are magnetic or gravitational and the relationship from that. And to understand how we got into the plasma science through nanostate and GaN state, we learned about words like monatomic and gradient and what that meant with respect to geometries and how we go through various dimensions and through various energy states, which reflect our dynamism. And all of this is natural. This is a natural plasma. And as such, it answers a lot of questions. And the basic question is where we come from. So energy is always in motion, and as such, we give it a charge. And then we can now investigate where do we come from and where are we going and what are the connections. And that is the key. What are the connections? The connections are the bridge. So we find that we have many limitations, and these limitations, in fact, extend right to our soul. So they, in fact, impinge on our soul limitations. So we have to look at what is natural, and we see that the sun is natural and the earth is natural, and there's an interaction between those. And we found that the soul of the man and the soul of the body mimics that. And so the science mimics that and is not natural. But there are independent variables, and we're trying to identify what are those variables and what does it mean to transform and what does it mean to transport. And we find that we have a lot of connections to do. And so between the points of discussion are connections. So to understand where we are and where we're going, we have to make that connection. And how do we predict that? So we really have to depend on our current knowledge. But, you know, when we talked about the terminology, that allowed us to gain some understanding. And then from the understanding, that allowed us to get to the knowing. But do we have to get bogged down with the details? Are the details in our way to get to the knowledge? It all depends. Details are a lot of fun. And I think that's one of the things I'm going to do today is I'm going to deviate from the standard that we've done in the past and use this as a bit of an intermission because we are at a watershed moment. And the watersheds are what we're talking about is how do we go from here to there? So the big watershed, of course, is to understand the difference between matter, plasma. And so all the plasma, all elements of the universe are plasma, but some plasma is physical and some is plasmatic. And so this is why the terminology was so confusing, because there's a physical plasma which you can touch, and there's a plasmatic plasma which you cannot touch, but you can sense it. And it is this sensory capability that we have that is the proof that you need that there's more to this universe than meets the eye. So when we look at our pursuit of limitations, we say that these limitations have to do with materialism. And so what is the materialism? Actually, it's a manifestation of the physicality. And in our understanding, our scientific understanding of this physicality, we relate it to nuclear decay. And that sounds kind of bad, doesn't it? When, you know, life is created through decay. And we're going to talk about that again today, because this decay, which is a reduction in energy transmission, it's a reduction in energy levels, is called gravitational. And it's gravitational transition of reality. So we all have our sense of reality. And the key word, reality, being physical or plasmatic, but really it's a sense. And do you sense it with your physicality and texture and touching, or do you sense it through your emotion and your soul? And so we find that the material things that we are pursuing on this planet, the main thing seems to be the pursuit of money. And so this pursuit becomes a proxy. It's a reality manifestation proxy, which is not what really manifestation is really all about. This pursuit is actually a pursuit of limitations. How do we shake that? So I've said, you know, we like to watch our detective shows. And the thing about it is that a detective is always looking for clues. And the best way to look at the clues is to find the evidence and examine it, make a hypothesis. And so all of these clues are what is evident. But that doesn't solve the case. The case is, why did this happen? And when we look at our knowing, the bridge to knowing, then that bridge is already built, because why is the answer. You see, the lack of evidence is also the evidence. So there's something in between, and therefore you know that there's something in between. That is all the proof that you need, and that also shows you the direction to investigate. And that's why we're going through these courses today, is because we need to establish our point of view and to understand where the future lies. And so we look at the creation of the earth, which is our home at this point in time, and we see that energy travels various paths. And these paths come in and they go out, they go around, but sometimes they just go right through. And so we've identified these paths as paths that have to do with emission and absorption. And they are magnetical and gravitational, but basically they are repulsion and attraction. The repulsion and attraction between the earth and the sky, which we call the magnetosphere. And how we travel through these paths is what we call susceptibility. So that's something that we can understand from a tangible perspective. But the thing is, when we got into GANs, we found that there was something else there. And it was creating a rotating field, which you started to see the evidence of. But we couldn't explain where it came from. And then we had to come to the reality. There was a hole in the GANs. And so many times we say, well, there's nothing there. Well, how can nothing be there when there's a hole? And that hole, although it looks like there's nothing, it obviously was something that created a hole in the GANs. So that's more evidence. And we need to lean on that because this is so important. So when we look at Mr. Keshe's books, book number 1, which is the universal order of creation of matter, and we say, we now have some answers as to how the universe was created, which conventional science has not been able to provide. Well, they have. The answer was, I don't know, or we haven't figured it out yet. Well, through the knowing by connection, we know how the universe is created because we understand the rules. So we've covered a lot of rules which help us to go from here to there. And book number 2 was the structure of light. And some rules had to be broken and some rules had to be discarded and other rules had to come into play. And it is to understand how we go from here to there that we got into book number 3, which is the origin of the universe. But how can book number 3 be the origin and be the 3rd book? So, maybe book number 3 should have been book number 1. And then book number 1 should have been book number 3, but it really doesn't matter. What matters is your point of view, or you coming or going. And the thing that really matters is the relationship. So the creation of the universe actually is related to energy, and it was created from energy, and it exists from energy. And this energy is always in motion, so you can't stop this energy. But the thing that you can do is understand that there's a direction, and that direction is the charge. So energy is a charge in motion. But where does it go? So when we looked at the universal order of creation, we've seen one plasma field that was combined with the 3 forces: antimatter, dark matter, and matter, which we discussed the difference between physical and plasmatic matter. And then there are 2 matters that work together, and there's an infinity loop that comes together. So this is more realistic as to how things work. And you notice that the 2 matters are of a different size. And size is important. So when the PM ticks, which is energy in motion throughout the universe, come together, they come together based on a commonality. And if there is something in common, then they do interact and they do come together. And we call this a force field. But when it becomes imbalanced, this becomes a magnetic field. And this is the beginning of creation. And this creation is our principal matter. But we have to assess our point of view on how this works. And most of us have turned our backs on this. So that is a commentary, but it's also a fact. And so can we turn our face to face this? And so becomes a very simple lesson. The plasma science is based on magnetical forces of attraction and repulsion. and this review is important because you can only have a magnetical force and a gravitational force from a mag-grav condition. Because as these forces are traveling, they are deciding, are they being created or are they decaying? And in fact, the creation and the decay are actually one and the same thing. They only determine the difference in direction. And so when a magnetical force is actually an emission from a mag-grav condition, and a gravitational force is an absorption to a mag-grav condition. And so within the mag-grav condition is a magnetical gravitational force which creates the field. And what happens when these fields are changing? So when we look at the nuclear decay of the neutron, we see that there is a byproduct, and that is the release of PM ticks. And this is very important because otherwise the universe wouldn't balance. You can't create something out of nothing. There always has to be something. So we created from a neutron a combination electron, proton, and PM ticks. And the PM ticks are energy in motion that goes through the universe. So we see that in some cases, from the mag-grav positioning, we have natural creation from natural decay. And then we have a combination of forces. And it's this combination of forces that creates a mag-grav condition. So it could be an individual condition or it could be a pair. But in fact, it could be more than that. So we find that in order for us to understand, we can't understand everything. So there has to be some kind of transition. This is the bridge that we're trying to build, the knowing by connection. And so when we start with the PM ticks, which is energy in motion, and as they come together with a commonality, not necessarily the lowest common denominator, but a common denominator, that is energy in motion. And when it comes together, it creates an X and Y axis, which gives you the field reference. And then as the energy comes in, you can't stop it. It has to go around. And how big is this field? Well, that is your Z axis. So now you have the mag-grav condition. So everything is continuing in motion. The magnetical feeding doesn't stop. The gravitational taking doesn't stop. And from the gravitational taking, it either is going to have to grow or it's going to have to pass it on. But you know what? It does both. And so the matter that we say that is PM ticks, which is magnetical, and the mag-grav, which we say is gravitational, is the divergence and convergence of energy in motion. And when we bring this all together in the force field, the antimatter is the principal matter, and the matter is the convergence of energy, and the in-between is the dark matter. That's the transition matter. And you know what? We're all in the transition zone right now, because what we're doing is we are identifying what the mag-grav condition is and how it stays together, which is the gravitational and magnetical forces, which are basic attraction and repulsion actions. And the result is the convergence or divergence of energy flow. And this is not only flowing on Earth, but is flowing through the universe. But there are variables. There are variables which affect, and the variables are beyond you. They are not under your control in that way that we like to talk about control, because there's a dependency. The universe is interdependent. And this interdependence is what causes the variableness. And so this variableness is beyond you, and it is independent of you. So therefore, when you decide to tell the universe to shut up, you are losing the benefit of this interdependence. because this interdependence is what you have to depend on. So when we talk about the cups of life, we're not talking about the cups of the pandemic. And I say this all the time because after, what is it now, 22 months, we still haven't resolved this issue that is becoming more and more important because it's a part of our life. And even if it ended tomorrow, it would still be a part of our life because there are other factors to consider. So when we look at how we built these cups, these particular cups were hybrids where we had three elements in there: a zinc plate, a copper coil, and a nano-coated copper coil. And we created this magnetical and gravitational field combination. And then we introduced a second cup where we substitute a copper plate instead. And we still had the magnetical and gravitational field complement. And then when we look at the two cups together, we find that, well, the first thing is, if we want to use them with respect to the pandemic, then we need to keep them 1 meter apart because there's an emotional and there's a physical aspect to it. Once we've done that, we can put the cups together as what we call the cups of man. And the cups of man collectively have an emotional and physical construct within them, which is a gravitational taking and a magnetical giving. But there's a balanced force field, which is the magnetical gravitational balance of the MAGRAV condition. And it is at this point that comes that independent variable. In comes the soul. And is the soul the only independent variable? Well, because we all have souls, so each soul is different. So that's one of the ways that we have independent variables, but then the souls work together. So as we see these three cups here, the cup of the soul, the cup of the man, which is combined from the cup of the emotion and the cup of physicality, each cup has a MAGRAV condition, each cup has a soul, and the collective has a MAGRAV condition and has a soul. So this is the star formation that we talked about. But in context, what is the context? Well, the context is our Earth, and the interaction with our Earth is the cup of inertia. And so we had a nano-coated copper coil, a second nano-coated copper coil, and a nano-coated copper plate. And we created this magnetical gravitational field balance system. And what did this balance with? Well, of course, it did balance with our home planet, the cup of Earth. And that had a nano-coated zinc coil, a nano-coated iron coil, and a nano-coated copper plate. And that created a magnetic field and a gravitational field and a balanced condition. So when we look at all of these cups, what we don't see is the field that is created, but we know that it's there. And this is one of the problems when archaeology, when we look at various cups, you know, are you looking at a teacup or are you looking at a kesh cup and you dig it up from the soil? And I wonder, have the archaeologists even taken samples of these, shall we say, pottery that have been discovered in the various archaeological digs around the world? Do we know, is it just ceramic? Is it just clay? Or, you know, is it like a kesh cup, where we have GANs infused in the ceramic layers? And so these become ceramic cups of life, where at this point in time, we have the cup of sweet and the cup of pressure and the cup of life, the ceramic cup of life. And they have various functions that not only for humans with respect to drinking using water, but we can also use them for, shall we say, soup or beverages. And we also have them for plants. And so that's kind of the subject today, is plants, because we want to realize what are plants doing in our life. But we can't restrict it to plants, you see, because all of life is, as we said, interdependent. So we understand now that the plasma science has a capability of creating a chain that is monatomic. And in fact, it unchains our physicality. It allows us to experience other things and to understand other things. So when we look at the interaction of all the cups, the cup of the soul, the cup of the emotion, the cup of physicality, the cup of inertia, and the cup of the earth, and we see that all collectively together have a magnetical gravitational relationship and a soul. And so this becomes our dimension in which we can go from the ground to the sky, which is the transition range, or we can go from one continent to another, which is the transmission range. But, you know, today we're going to talk about man's classification, because are we going to be here or are we going to be there? And whenever we are, we have to identify where we are. At that point in time, we put a fence around it. We identify it, and then we put a limitation on it. So one of the things about botany is that it identifies things by classification. And I'm going to do something a little bit different today, is I'm going to indulge, and I hope you indulge me, so I want to indulge you in some stories. And so we'll do a little bit of storytelling, shall we say, do the storytelling in lieu of, shall we say, direct teaching, but we can do both. So just to set the ground rules, when we talk about classification, around this world, we identify different climate zones. So the two extremes, deserts and tropics. And then, of course, that's the others has to do with in between, there's a temperate climate. And then, of course, there's the cold climate, what we call the Arctic. And then, of course, we have water. And we have two types of water, fresh water and seawater. So this is not an in-depth study, just to give you an idea of some of the classifications of the harvest of the climate zones. But we also have harvest types. Harvest types referring to plants. Well, that would be either fruit that grows on the trees or vegetables that grow near the ground or the tubers that grow in the ground. But of course, we know we have other higher harvest types and some of the animals that we eat. So I didn't put them on this list because what I wanted to talk about was how we like to be at home on the range. And that's a normal thing. And the normal thing that we have to take into account is that plants also like to have companions. And so this is in direct contrast to this divide and conquer mentality that we have, where we like to put fences around things and examine things in their individuality. But we say all things work in combination, and plants definitely do that as well. And there's a reason for that. Because what you find is that these plants position themselves according to a certain distance. And that distance is greater than the distance of range of the predator. And if that distance is not capable of being there, then they have to create a refugium, which allows them to exist in the presence of predators. So it becomes kind of a symbiotic relationship where the predators can feed, but not destroy the source of the feeding. And the plants can continue to supply without losing their status. But there's another way to do that, and that's through migration. And we understand that birds migrate, butterflies migrate. Well, plants migrate too, and one of the ways they do that is to put wings on their seeds so that the seeds will fly. But another way they do that is they stick to the surface of birds and insects. And then, of course, fish do the same thing. They'll stick to the feet of the birds as the birds go into the water. Well, not the fish, but the eggs. And so the birds could carry the eggs. They don't even know they're carrying the eggs. But it all depends on your point of view. And today's point of view, what I would like to do is to tell you a story about the Rift Lakes. The Rift Lakes are in Africa, and they are considered, the three lakes in Africa are considered the Rift Lakes. In other words, there's a rift in the surface of the earth where these lakes have come, and Lake Victoria feeds into Lake Tanganyika, feeds into Lake Malawi. These are the three Rift Lakes, and they're in Central Africa, and they're very famous because they have a certain kind of fish. And that fish is very colorful. But the first thing I want to talk about is Lake Victoria, because it's a home to a very important fish called a tilapia, which is a food fish and very prolific, very prolific. But it also has another vegetation, which are called hyacinths. And these water hyacinths cause problems. So this was my introduction to water gardening, because I just wanted to find how to get rid of my problems in the family with respect to health issues, but I had to learn about life. And one of the best ways to learn about it was through water gardening, because it involved plants and fish. And so the first plant that we wanted to talk about was water hyacinths. And so water hyacinths float on the water, and they have a certain way of propagation, and it entangles everything. So going back to Lake Victoria, what they decided to do to control the plant, which is one of the fastest, if not the fastest growing plant on the planet, is to dump chemicals in the lake. And the problem, of course, was that you can't just kill the plants, you kill the fish as well. And so not only did this impact on the tilapia, which were a food fish, but it eliminated a lot of species in that lake. Well, you know, when you eliminate on one side, then you increase the importance on the other side. And the other side, of course, was Lake Tanganyika. But before I get into that, I want to just tell you a little story about water hyacinths, because these are tropical plants. And one of the things that they do is they pick up heavy metals. And because of that, they are nature's gift. And also, they create biomass, which is another of nature's gift. So you really have to wonder about the governments around Lake Victoria and how they treat nature's gift with chemicals. But in North America, we had a phenomenon with respect to pond building. And one of the nice things about pond building is that you get to show off to your neighbors. And so we have pond tours. And I went on a pond tour. And what was very interesting, because I had to learn how to grow hyacinths. And I discovered that the majority of hyacinths in Canada had two problems. And one problem was that because of the fear of the invasion of species, they cut the roots. Well, what we all learned is that roots are fundamental to the plants, particularly since the soul lives in the roots, or at the base of the stem anyway. So it really, it's a really close shave for a lot of plants. So it's very difficult to sell these plants. And I was in the business of selling plants. So you had to really grow the roots back before you could sell them. And so some growers were impatient and they would sell the plants prematurely. And the only way that I could break into the market was to offer something of greater value. And that value was I sold hyacinths with 5 bulbs, and everybody else sold hyacinths with 4 bulbs. And so, wait a second, they're all Eichhornia crassipes, yes, but the more bulbs on the plant, the more valuable the plant. And so I became very successful at this. And I went on a pond tour, and this pond tour was about 2.5 hours from my home base. So in order to justify the trip, I took a load of hyacinths and delivered them to a garden center. And so on that trip, I was able to generate some income. And then we went to the pond tour to have some fun. And it was terrific. People spending $30,000 to $50,000 on a pond, not a problem. And, you know, when you look at a pond, and we talked about in our physics, our physicality, and our chemistry, our physicality, and we talked about our kits. Well, they're pond kits. And so you have your landscaping, you have your liner, you have your water, you have your plants, you have your waterfall, and you have your fish, and so you create a little paradise in your garden. And I came into this one shop, and I have to tell you, we did about 22 visits that day. So, you know, you can imagine in your town a convoy of 50 cars driving around the city, going from location to location. It's quite a lot of fun. A lot more fun than we're having today, right? So anyway, we would go in there, and I noticed something very strange. And I wasn't working. I had finished my job, and suddenly I turned into being a detective. I didn't want to turn into a detective. I just wanted to turn into a tourist. But something was missing, you see. Something was not right. And what was not right was that the algae was brown. And the other thing that was not right was the color of the water. And that's one thing, how can you tell from the color of the water when the water is clear? Well, that was something that you just learn to know, because water is not water, as I've said many times. So some water comes out of the tap, and some water is plasmatic, and we know that water has an affinity with GANs, so it exchanges energy. And so I developed that understanding of that. And when I looked at the water, it didn't look quite right. And then I looked at the hyacinths in the water, and there was something really strange about those hyacinths, because the color of the hyacinths did not match or did not fit with the color of the other plants around the pond. And then I realized all the hyacinths had 5 bulbs. Now, how is it possible that all the hyacinths would have 5 bulbs? Because some would have 2 or 3, and some would have 7 or 8, but they were all uniform. And then I realized, oh, those are my hyacinths. Well, I just delivered them 2 hours ago. How did they get into this pond? And then I looked at the owner, and he was kind of nervous. And I thought to myself, I knew he was a little bit stressed when we got there, and I couldn't understand that. I didn't pay any attention, but now I had to pay attention. And I thought, well, somewhere between the 2 hours that I delivered and now, these hyacinths got into this pond. So obviously there was a lot of urgency, and you want to have a nice pond, don't you, when you have 50 people coming to your house and you're showing off. So I looked around and I said, something's wrong. And then I looked at the fence behind the pond, and that fence was pressure treated. And if you understand with pressure treated wood, it is toxic to the environment. And so I suspected very highly that he has killed all the life-giving forces in that pond, and that he was forced to save face, spend several $100s in buying hyacinths from the garden center, which I delivered to. So I waited for the crowd to move away, and I got him in isolation, and I just asked him a question. I said, you know, are you having any trouble with your pond? And he kind of looked at me sheepishly, and he says, well, yeah, kind of. And I said, well, just before you answered the question, so let me just explain. And I explained that I supplied the hyacinths that are in the water, and he turned white as a ghost, and he knew he was caught. But I didn't mention that to him to put him down. I genuinely wanted to find out what the problem was. And he admitted that he had just purchased the hyacinths, and he came in 5 minutes before the tour arrived. So he was rushing like a madman. He had to scoop up several hundred hyacinths at the garden center, pay for them, and run back and put them in the pond and try and act like everything is normal. So a very contrived situation. But what we found that there was a missing element. You can't just put all the parts together. There's something that's missing. And he couldn't figure out what it was. And we figured out what it was. And that was the chemical rain that was coming off of the fence. And what really upset him more was that that fence was on his neighbor's property and he couldn't do anything about it. But, you know, it isn't enough to spend $30,000 on a pond, because you really have to know how to keep things alive. And that's a story about the water hyacinths. And one of the nice things about it is water hyacinths can get rid of algae. And there is a freshwater algae and there's a saltwater algae. And so these are two different types of biotopes. And the freshwater algae is generally speaking green, and the saltwater algae is generally speaking red. But that's a very simple way to look at things. But we have a very bad, shall we say, understanding of algae. That's something that is bad. Whereas depending on the type of algae, it can be an absolutely great water purifier. And so can hyacinths. And the two do work together. And it's really, that part is very interesting. But what I want to draw your attention to is that the fresh water is fresh, and it's the water that melts from the snow on the top of the mountains, comes down through the rivers. And then these rivers flow into the oceans, and the oceans are salt water. And the difference, of course, is that in the fresh water, the pH fluctuates enormously. The range can be almost 2 on the pH scale. We know that 2 on the pH scale is 2 orders of magnitude. Very unstable. Whereas the salt water, a fluctuation of more than 0.2 on the pH scale is lethal to the life in the ocean. So stability is very, very important. That's one thing that I'd like to talk about today, is about stability. And I'll talk about that a little bit later, because when you have a rapid change in your environment, how fast can you adapt? So one of the things we found out with the hyacinths was that the fish really like to suck on the roots of the hyacinths. And they also suck on the roots of the algae. And they don't destroy the plant. But, you know, do you like to eat hamburger or do you like to eat filet mignon? And the fish aren't stupid. They like to feed on the new growth. And when they run out of the new growth, then they destroy the plant. So we found that fish, particularly in ponds such as goldfish or koi, they like to destroy the plants. So I took the plants, the water hyacinths, and I pulled them out of the water and put them around trees. And the reason I did that was because trees had a problem, and that had to do with nematodes. And so the nematodes would climb out of the ground and affect the tree. And so by putting the hyacinths around, they would decompose in a matter of 9 days. And they kept their nematodes away. So it's not that we killed the nematodes, something provided a barrier between the nematodes and the desire of the nematodes to climb the tree. And so this is very good for the trees. And we found this to be a very excellent symbiotic relationship. And so rather than waiting to have the hyacinths recover from the destruction that the fish were doing, we transferred the hyacinths to a beneficial use by putting them around the trees. And we had a refugium where we grew other hyacinths that were not affected by the fish. And we harvested a bunch and put them back into the pond. And so the ideal way to keep a pond is to have more than one pond. Oh, okay. Well, this is good, because imagine if we didn't have different lakes in the Rift Lakes system, we would have been losing all of our fish. But in Lake Tanganyika and Lake Malawi, well, actually in all the Rift Lakes, Lake Victoria as well, there's a species of fish which are called cichlids. And then we find that there are African cichlids and South American cichlids. So I know you thought this was about botany, but this is about classifications. So this brings me to another funny story, because the subject matter is knowing by connection. And this world is a very big world. But this is an unbelievable story because I want to talk about the University of Guelph. So the University of Guelph, which is in the Great Lakes region of Canada, is an agriculture university, well-versed in agriculture. And they have an arboretum, which is interesting because I just told you the story about what we did with the trees. Well, they don't do that. But in Guelph, there was a very popular aquarium club because, interestingly enough, what is characteristic about the Rift Valley is the extremely high pH of the water. And what is characteristic about the area around the University of Guelph is the extremely high pH of water. And so we had a very thriving aquarium club. And this aquarium club had seen the benefits of importing African cichlids, because African cichlids were very prolific and they were a lot of fun. A lot of fun to watch the eggs hatch, watch them grow and trade. And the price range was going anywhere from $3 to $10. But if they could get wild caught African cichlids, then those fish were selling for $80. Whoa. So the African club, the aquarium club got together and decided to make an African trip. And they hooked up with a gentleman named Stuart Grant, and he is an expert on African cichlids in Lake Malawi. And they went over there. And what was interesting, one of the participants had seen a t-shirt from the University of Guelph in Malawi. But it wasn't an ordinary t-shirt. It was a t-shirt that he donated. He donated to where wealthy Canadians donate to impoverished Africans. And the reason he donated this t-shirt was, one, because it had University of Guelph on it. And two, because he had a jelly sandwich and he dropped some jelly on his t-shirt and it stained his t-shirt so bad that he couldn't wash it out. So it had a unique stain on it. So he knew that t-shirt very well. What are the chances that you go from Canada to Malawi and you find the t-shirt, and it wasn't in a shop, it was on one of the people who were working at the Stewart Grant Center. What are the chances of that happening? And he asked him, says, oh, where'd you get that t-shirt? He says, well, he got it at the market. I said, the market? What do you mean the market? This was a donation. Well, he says, I bought it. And he said, why did you buy it? Well, because it had University of Guelph on it. So it had kind of prestige. And then you say, oh, how much did you pay for it? $5 for a used donated t-shirt in a country like Malawi with 5 million people who couldn't feed themselves. Do you see the connection? One of the famous fish in Malawi is the corulus. The proper Latin name is Libidinochromis corulus. And that fish is yellow in North America, but in Malawi it's blue. And that's why it's called a corulus, because cerulean blue is a color. And so this fish was named that color. So in the wild-caught condition, a corulus was blue. And then the offspring of a wild-caught fish is called an F1, first generation. And in Malawi, the first generation will still be blue, but in North America, the blue fish turned yellow. And this wasn't so bad because the bright yellow color made that fish very attractive. And so that's the story of Lake Malawi. Lots of fish there, lots of species, lots of classifications, and they had Latin names. And so they met Stewart Grant, and he hooked them up with another gentleman by the name of Ad Connings. And Ad Connings was an ichthyologist who was trained in medicine and biology. And he's a Dutchman, but he was based in Texas. And every year he would fly to Lake Tanganyika when he could, because it was a war zone. And he became a very famous expert on Lake Tanganyika cichlids. And he was a skilled deep diver. And why was this important? Well, you see, because Lake Tanganyika was over 50 meters deep, 50 meters deep, and there were fish that were right at the bottom, which puts an enormous amount of pressure on these fish, and they have to withstand that pressure. So there are fish that are 50 meters down, whereas in Malawi, the fish are only 3 meters down. And that's the difference. And so you find that the fish from Lake Malawi are smaller. They may be 5 centimeters. Whereas the fish from Lake Tanganyika, they may be pushing 10 centimeters, just for instance. But what was so fascinating was when they came back to Guelph, they had invited Ad Connings and Stewart Grant to come to Guelph and do a seminar. And this was a major event. And the reason for it was because there were 500 people jam-packed in this auditorium to hear these two gentlemen. And they put on a presentation, kind of like what I'm putting on today. But the thing was that at that time, and this was going back about 25 years, they didn't have PowerPoints and computers to make presentations. They used slides. And as such, the only thing that he could show was the pictures. So the big thing about it is the classification. That's what I'm talking about today. The identification of the fish in order to identify them properly, or whether it's fish or plants or trees or whatever in biology, in botany, is to use a Latin name. And he rattled off about 60 to 70 names. And these are all, as you can see, very complex names. And unfortunately, he couldn't remember one name. And he had to remember them all because he didn't have the name on the slide. He just had the picture. So when he looked at the fish, he had to remember the name, and he remembered all the species, but he couldn't remember the one. And it really, really bothered him. So as he finished the lecture, suddenly it came to his mind, and he named the fish. Wow, the cheer in the audience, everybody went wild. It was like a touchdown at a football game or a big goal at a soccer game. Everybody cheered. It was amazing. And that was kind of amazing. And that's what made the hobby so interesting. And why do I bring this up? Because to be a hobbyist, you had to have the identification. And if you wanted to talk, you had the terminology. And if you knew the difference between Libicromus caerulus and Cyphotilapia frontosa, then you were a genuine hobbyist. And you had to know how to feed them. You had to know how to raise them. The fascination was with watching them lay the eggs and breeding. And then you knew the difference in type, and you found that the African cichlids in Malawi would breed very rapidly, like every month, whereas the fish in Lake Tanganyika may take up to 2 years before they start breeding. And so the Lake Tanganyika fish were more expensive. So they were more expensive because they were harder to get to, because to get to them, you had to dive 50 meters down. So you have decompression to worry about. And it's a war zone. So you couldn't catch all the fish in all the types, all the places. But interestingly enough, these fish had to have an identity. And so they were identified by their classification. They were identified by the person who found them, and they were identified by the location that they were in. And then when you look at fish, they have and animals, they have a trophic sequence. And what is a trophic sequence? And that is the bigger one eats the smaller one. And the location of where they reside is also a factor. So now you have the survival of the fittest, you have a species classification, you have an environment, whether it's Tanganyika or Malawi, and then you have a location within the lake. And so some fish were more rare than others. And what was so alarming to the club when they went over to Malawi was that the people in Malawi were actually eating the fish. So can you imagine? You have a little tiny fish that you eat. When I say little tiny fish, it would fit in your hand, and you would eat like 5 or 6 of them. And all they could think about was, in Canada, that these fish were worth about $80 a piece. So, if they ate 5 fish, that would be $400. But who cares about the 5 million people in Malawi who are hungry? Anyway, the respect for the industry, whether it be plants or fish, or any type of classification, is to understand the Latin names. And so what that does, it tells you about the origin. And so we talked about in the physicality about the Big Bang Theory and what that does. And in the chemistry, we talked about the primordial will and the evolution of man. But we had another gentleman by the name of Darwin, and he talked about the survival of the fittest and about natural selection. And there's something wrong with that psychology, because it's gone down the wrong path. And it's only reasonable because when you look at some of the things that go on in Africa, say a lion will attack a wildebeest or something like that, what is interesting is for feeding, the lion will eat the intestines first. And we see lions as meat eaters. So our knowledge, generally speaking, the way it's taught, is incomplete and it's not in depth. But one of the fascinations of the fish hobby, as I said, was to watch how the eggs were hatched. And one of the fish that we had there was a cuckoo catfish. Now, cuckoo catfish is a street name. The Latin name is Synodontis multipunctatus, and it lives in Lake Tanganyika, 50 meters below the surface of the water. So what is interesting is that this fish works in gangs, and most of the cichlids are what we call mouth brooders. And so what that means is they lay an egg, the male goes and fertilizes the egg, and then the female picks it up and gestates the egg in their mouth. And the difference between the Malawi fish and the Tanganyikan fish is that the Malawi fish get about 30 offspring, whereas Tanganyikans only get about 10, roughly. But the cuckoo catfish don't gestate their own eggs. They use a cichlid for that purpose. So they come in a gang of 3. The first cuckoo catfish comes in and disturbs the female while she's having her little dance with the male. And so the female has to run because the cuckoo catfish is very aggressive. The second catfish comes up and eats the female's egg, eats the cichlid's egg. And the third catfish comes and lays a catfish egg. Now, can you tell an expression on a fish's face? Hard, isn't it? Well, when I seen the cichlid do this, and I watched this episode for about 3 hours, and I was so very happy because these cuckoo catfish were like about $80 each. And I had a colony of them. And it took me a long time to see them breeding. But the face, I still remember the face on the cichlid. And she looked at it and it was in sheer horror. And the first thing she did was she seen an egg and she went for it. And so what happens really is as the eggs hatch in her mouth, the catfish eggs eat the other eggs. The catfish eggs hatch and then they eat the other eggs. So can you imagine the secondary horror of the female cichlid when she spits out catfish? It's amazing. And this is how nature works. And so there's an interdependence, as you can see. And is it the survival of the fittest or is it the survival of the smartest? But, you know, the thing is, somebody somewhere is teaching these fish to act this way. So when we look at this, what we call a trophic sequence, the trophic level of an organism is the position it occupies in the food web. And so the food chain is a succession of organisms that eat other organisms. So we can understand that a bigger one eats a smaller one. But isn't it interesting that when you get to the largest fish in the water, which is a whale, it eats plankton. And then you find, well, a whale is not really a fish, it's a mammal. And so this is kind of logic that breaks down. So something is missing. And what is missing is that when you look at the Latin name of these fish, and these are pseudotrophius, these are cichlids, but they're blue and they have stripes. But these fish come from Lake Malawi. And then you look at these fish, which come from Lake Tanganyika, and these are frontosis, and they live 50 meters down with the synodontis. But what's interesting is they come with stripes on the side, and some have 5 stripes, 6 stripes, or 7 stripes. And so one of the things that's evolved is the failure of the educational system and the total failure of the hobby. That in today, thanks to internet and gaming and preoccupation and of things that are not necessary, we have lost our education, our basic education. So we don't call these frontoses anymore. We don't even call them fronts for short. We call them 5-bar, 6-bar, or 7-bar. How's that for identification? And why is that? Because we really don't care anymore about how they're raised. We don't care about their biotope. We, don't care about their interdependence. We don't even care. We don't know the difference between Tanganyika and Malawi. That's just someplace overseas. All we care about is that the fact that these fish may be worth about $150, and just build an aquarium, add the fish and add water, and we're quite happy. And this is something that's gone wrong. And the other thing that's gone wrong is that one of the things that was distressing about the hobby, just like the gentleman at the water garden, there was something missing. And that's what I'm talking about today. There's something missing. And because in Malawi, the fish would grow in a rocky biotope, the way they designed their aquariums was with rocks. Well, how can the lake stay clean with fish and rocks? What's missing? So in Canada, when someone looks at an aquarium, they look at the fish. At least in Europe, when they look at an aquarium, they look at the plants. Okay, because there's a symbiosis between the plants and the fish. But that's not enough, there's something missing. And so we find that these bars that we're talking about are actually limits on our knowledge. And so we talked about in the past how, some bars are for drinking and some bars are for lawyers and some bars are for prisoners. But these bars are a barrier, you see. They're a barrier to understanding. So when we got into the chemical aspect of it, when we produce a chemical, on the one hand, is the chemical that we produce a pollution? And is the byproduct from creating that chemical a pollution? And so when we say chemical plants, our chemical plants, how do they compare versus natural plants? Well, it's very interesting because what happens with the plants, you see, and one of the most famous plants is an Iris pseudochorus. There's that pseudo name again. It keeps coming up. We have a pseudotropheus, now we have a pseudochorus, and the Iris pseudochorus is a very hardy water plant. And regardless of what it says on Wikipedia, that it comes from Asia or Northwest Africa, it's a major plant here in Canada. And it's interesting because it's one of the first plants to grow. And it grows at 5 degrees Celsius. And in the process, what I always thought was that the plant would grow, and it would grow where the snow would melt. The plant would literally grow with maybe several inches of snow on the ground. But what happens is that the plant creates a dome of heat, and it melts the snow. And that melting water obviously nourishes the plant. And of course, the snow is full of nutrients that is picked up from the environment. And so this is one of the first plants to grow in Canada in the spring. And it's a very important plant because it can also filter the water. But the way it's sold is as an individual plant. And it's, you know, pretty valuable because it sells from anywhere up to $20. And it took me a while to learn about this plant because I had a plant that was 2 years old. And this plant I couldn't hold in my hands. This plant was so big, I had to have 2 hands. And I could barely fit it in my car when I delivered it. This plant was extremely valuable. And so this is the knowledge that people have on advanced knowledge on how to keep plants. And when you have this kind of knowledge, and then you understand the source of people like scientists like Stuart Grant or Ed Connings and how they understand the biotopes and everything, and then make life fascinating. And then you get a confusion in the hobby. And I bring this out because the corollas are called electric yellows. And then we know that there are electro blues. Electric blues are pseudotrophius, sorry. But today, electric blues are African cichlids. Excuse me, they're South American cichlids. But they don't come from South America, they come from Asia. And in Asia, they are hybrids. They are contrived species. And so they're electric blues. And these electric blues sell for around $30 a piece. But the thing about the South American cichlids is that they are much larger. And so how do you keep these type of fish in a pond? Well, very hard. And so they come from South America. And so we don't call them ocellatus, we call them Oscars. They're huge. They're about, they can grow up to be about, what we say, 15, 20 centimeters. Anyway, they destroy all the plants. So the only way that you can keep them is just in an aquarium with water. And they're like a dog. They live a long time. And my friend had an aquarium, large aquarium, 60, how much would it be? 1,000 liters, 1,000-liter aquarium, 240 gallons. And he put it in the kitchen. And what was interesting, he kept them for 10 years and he fed them fish, which is, you know, kind of the strongest. Survival of the strongest, survival of the fittest. Survival of the fittest. And of course, to keep them for 10 years is a long time. And they're just like a water dog, really. That's what you do. You come in, you feed them, you watch them, and then you leave. But he put them in the kitchen so they would have company and he would have company. Well, one day that aquarium broke. And the reason it broke was because his kids were playing hockey in the kitchen. And so not only did the fish die, the aquarium broke, the house was flooded, but there was a tenant downstairs. I told you I'd be telling you some stories. The damage to the tenant downstairs was over $10,000. And this is, you know, one of the hazards of living in Canada. You can have a flood in your apartment. But, you know, that's, do you cry for the 10 years that the fish you kept alive, or the 10 years that you kept your son alive? And I guess for a split second, he had to make a tough decision. But the problem you see with the fish was they would dry up. And this becomes a very important point. This is one of the things I want to talk about today, that when you take that fish out of the water, if it doesn't have the water and it can't adapt to the air, it'll dry up. And so these fish dried up and they died. They are cichlids. And the same thing that happens with African cichlids. But there's another cichlid, and that's called an angel. And its Latin name is Pterophyllum. And people don't know that these are cichlids, but they are. But what's very interesting is the way they lay their eggs. And the biggest problem for them is algae grows on their legs. And this is one of the reasons people in the hobby have trouble. But we know that plants purify the water and keep the algae at bay. So one of the South American plants that the South American angels use is an Amazon sword. And guess where that is? That's in the Amazon jungle. And it's called an Echinodorus gersbachii. And it's a tall plant. And it'll grow half a meter tall. It has big, broad leaves. And interestingly, the angel comes and lays the eggs on the leaf. So it has to come at kind of an angle, a tangent angle, to drop the eggs onto the leaf. And then the male comes and fertilizes. And isn't it interesting? The male defends the eggs. So the female goes and hides in the plants. And so this is an interdependence between the fish and the plant. And what's interesting further about these Amazon swords is that in Canada, they were retailing for around $15 each. And so it's a very valuable plant. And we know that plants grow underwater. We call that submerged. And plants grow above the water. We call that emerged. And emergent plants grow 10 times faster than submerged plants. So one of the tricks, of course, is to grow the Amazon sword out of the water. Well, if you take a submerged plant and you put it into an emerged condition, it will dry up just like the fish. So how does that work? And in the Amazon jungle, you have a pH fluctuation in the water of almost a pH of 2 or more than 2. And so what does that mean? Well, that means when after a rainstorm, the water runs off from the land, it drops the pH, makes it acidic. The eggs hatch. The plants can take a flooding. The emergent plants can take a flooding. Within a day or so, the flooding dries down. The emergent plants have survived. But if you take submerged plants and introduce them into an emergent environment, they will shrivel up and die. And so it was very interesting to find out how these Amazon swords were growing so prolifically in North America. And then I found out a little secret. They grew them emerged, and then they submerged them prior to taking them to the market. And so the hobbyist, without knowing this particular thing, didn't understand whether or not he was buying an emerged plant or a submerged plant, which is kind of dishonest. But, you know, it worked. But so many hobbyists could not keep these plants alive because they couldn't adapt to their environment. So how did the submerged plant become an emerged plant? It actually grew into the new environment. And so it had time to adapt. And why am I talking about all of this? You see, because there are different ways that things propagate. So we have plant propagation where we can take grafts. Obviously, we have egg layers, and there are even live bearers, which are like guppies that they will lay they will drop a baby into the water. and no egg. They basically, I don't know if you would call them mammals. We call them live bearers. And then of course plants have seeds, and they also have injectors. They're insects that do injections, and then they're parasites. And of course we have flowers, and then we also have daughter plants, and then we have creepers. And the subject is too wide to discuss. What I want to discuss is the difference between the sea and land, because you see, I talked about the whales, and you say, well, is the whale a fish? And if you follow the survival of the fittest, you can say, well, as you know, one fish like an Oscar will eat a small goldfish, and then the bigger fish eats the smaller fish, and so on. But the whale eats plankton, and the whale is a live bearing fish. Its babies are born in the water. Now, submerged plants and emerged plants have a problem with changing their environment. They shrivel up. Fish going from the water and jumping out of the tank, going into the air, shrivel up, they dry. Babies are born in humans in the placenta, and they get born and they can breathe within seconds. How is that possible? How is it possible to adapt so quickly? And Mr. Kesh brought that up on Thursday. And this is the thing that we need to understand when we go into outer space. If we change our environment faster, then we create an adaptability on our part, we won't be able to survive. So, but it is possible, because babies born in the placenta can do this. And so, although people are ignorant of this knowledge, these are things that you learn by connection. You learn that there are things that we need to know. There are gaps in our knowledge. It's not enough. And you could say, well, fish who are in the water have gills. And so babies in the placenta can breathe. And then when they get born, they come into the air, and then they have lungs. There's another fish, it's called a beta. We call that a labyrinth fish. And it has both. It has lungs and it has gills. And so it doesn't just depend on the exchange of oxygen in the water, but it actually has to come to the surface to breathe the air. But if that fish jumps out of the water and stays for too long, it will dry up. It will shrivel up and dry up. So human babies don't shrivel up and dry up. Isn't that interesting? So when we talk about classification, we're actually talking about limitation, the limitation of our knowledge. And as fascinating as I hope this discussion has been, the whole purpose of it is to show that when we change our environment, we have to have an adaptability, and that there is knowledge that we need to have that is not enough. It is not enough to understand the physics. It's not enough to understand the chemistry of the water. It's not enough to, have a bountiful knowledge of all of these other things. It's fun to talk about. It's a nice hobby, but you know what? When, you have to keep things alive, you need more. And that's what we're doing in the plasma science. And so I apologize for deviating from the main kind of teaching. But the thing is, we all are good detectives. And to be a good detective, you have to examine the evidence. And the absence of evidence is evidence. So when we look at the plasma feeding and how it works, it doesn't follow Darwin's theory of the survival of the fittest. The stronger feeds the weaker, the exact opposite. And it isn't the strongest feeding the weakest, it's feeding all of the weakest, all intermediate levels. The entire stacker is feeding, and one feeds another, and there's an interdependence. And we found that the GANS has an affinity to not only promote life, but it interacts with our emotions as well, which are non-tangible and non-physical. And there are other things to take into account. So when we look at the basic 5-cup stacker system and we see, okay, we have our soul, we have our emotion, we have our physicality, but then we have our environment. And our interaction with that environment, which we call inertia, is how we are surviving on this planet. Is that enough? And this is the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute, which means our knowledge has to extend beyond the planet into the universe. And so there are factors that we need to take into account that are what we call independent variables. And so I have a surprise coming for you. When we looked at physics and we had to review the physics, we had to understand that the key characteristic of physics is that it's man-made. When we look at terminology, we introduce a word called tines. Tines are the teeth, like on this pitchfork, okay? And tines are some things that are on the ends of a plow. And in this plow, it creates furrows into the ground. And much of our agriculture and much of how we understand life is through chemicals. And we found that the biggest problem with that is it's man-made. And so I talked about the Great Rift Lakes. Well, there's another set of Great Lakes, and this is boundary between the US and Canada. And these are Great Lakes. And just south of the Great Lakes is another great river, the Mississippi River. And you know, when this thing gets flooded, which it happened, it's an environmental catastrophe. And the pollution isn't just, say, all the fuel in the gas stations that get flooded. It isn't all the waste and everything that gets flooded. When we look at the physicality of something, like we look at the Universal Cup and we say, well, here are all the physical components. Okay, well, how do we put it together? Well, let's take a look at the chemical inventory and we'll put that together. Okay, and then we add the environment. So we have the different parts of the environment. So what do we put all that together? And then we find that the sum of the parts is greater than the sum of the parts. And we have to compare, what about the details of knowing? Do we have to know the details to know? We have to make a connection. And so we looked at the physical table of elements. We aligned it a little bit differently. We're going to revisit this again because what we have learned so far in this knowing is that we've learned that we don't know enough. And so we've learned how to make the kit, but we need to make the music. And we've seen our relationship with our point of view, from our gravitational point of view to the magnetical interaction with the rest of the universe. And we say, well, it isn't just the cup, it's the biotope as well. Are we on Earth and where on Earth? Or are we in space and where in space? And then when we look at something else that's missing, I want to say, well, there's a brain. And we know with that brain that we can create energy and motion. And so all of these things that we play with on Earth here are trying to contribute to our creature comforts. So we have ideas, we have knowledge, we have wishes, hopes, and aspirations, and most of all, we have love. And this is the energy that is in motion all over the place. This is the plasma fuel that fuels this universe. The plasma fields are the transaction currency. And that's what's missing. When we look at all things working in combination, it's the plasma interaction that is missing. And we know that when we look at the cups of life, we see that we created basic physical components, but we had an environment that brought us different types of GANs and brought us amino acids, which are the building blocks of life, absolutely essential for our plants, our animals, and all the other species and all of life that is on this planet, whether it's salt water or fresh water. And there's a relationship. And then we find there's a limitation in our knowledge because the math of physics does not balance. The totality is achieved when we take into account all the energy, including the PM ticks, including the matter, the antimatter, the dark matter. And then we look at our knowledge and we see that we're just a little tiny red speck in the rest of the universe. And so this is representative of our knowledge. And over the last 30 years, our knowledge has come down. It has really dropped down. So one of the things we talked about, and I wanted to give you food for thought, is that we use agriculture, we use plants to feed ourselves. Animals also feed off the plants. And then we also eat the animals. So all of this has souls. Whether it's a plant has a soul, fish, a man, an animal, all of it. Even the nematode has a soul. And so when we use food as a drug, we find that some things are altering our environment. We're coming to a watershed moment. We're looking at different kinds of feeding systems because what the feeding system is looking for, the bottom line, is nourishment. And this watershed, so that you understand, there's a leeward side and there's a windward side. And this is the direction that the wind is flowing. And so the winds of change are on the windward side. And so what we find with the watershed is to show you that there's something missing. Some things are out of range. And the way we operate is a problem. So one of the subjects is a sheldrake. And so, well, what is a sheldrake? What's a type of duck? And we all know what ducks are, right? If it looks like a duck and walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck, right? But there's another sheldrake, and that's a Rupert sheldrake. And he has a theory that countermands the Darwinian theory. It's called morphogenic resonance. And why this is important is because how does a kitten, in the absence of its mother, know how to take care of itself? How does a baby fish that is taken from Malawi and brought to North America know how to survive? And how does that fish know to brood its eggs in its mouth? So is this morphological, or is this genetic, or is it resonance? resonance implies frequency, it implies physicality. So the resonance implies a physicality in terms of a reaction, but the morphogenic is more implying the kind of energy that is creative. And as a result of this particular theory, this sheldrake is classed as a scientific heretic. Does that sound familiar? He is accused of speaking about pseudoscience. Does that sound familiar? We want to get back to nature. We are nature. So what we have to understand is that when we deal with limitations, when we have the physical subjects and the chemical subjects and the classification subjects, what we have to understand is that energy in motion comes through different energy states. And those states are physical, plasma states are plasmatic. And this is how we can transcend the limitations of science. And it is very important because you see, one of the things that we have is a change in our point of view. There is a plasma state, there is a physical state, there's an in-between state. And somehow from the plasma state to the physical state, there has to be a transformation. And what happens in the physical state? The physical state allows us to transport ourselves on this planet. Well, now we come up with a new possibility where we can transport ourselves into outer space as well. And so when we talk about manifestation, and to define manifestation, it's our perception of a stack of reality, right? All fields, when they come together, they form another. That is the essence of manifestation. And it is this plasma feeding that leads to this manifestation. So yeah, there's a non-tangible and a tangible manifestation, a non-visible and a visible manifestation. There's a plasmatic and a physical. So there's a plasmatic reality and a physical reality. Whichever reality you're talking about is a form artifact, and the emotions of presence is that form artifact. So we are in the presence. And so there's a new state. And that new state is the link between the soul of the man and the soul of the body. And we know about this state because every night when we go to sleep, we have a dream, and that is the dream state. And we're going to talk about that more in the future. Because yesterday, dreams came true. Dreams came true. We are at a watershed moment. Yesterday was opening of the new foundation exhibition in Linz, and the knowledge has an opportunity to come forward and fill that gap. So when we looked at what we had here, vertical life is our plant life, the horizontal life is our animal life. And we are both, we are in between. So we find that, you know, when we're discussing angels or angles, we look at the relationship between the vertical enhancement and the horizontal enhancement units. And we find that there's more to be offered. And we're hoping to see it very shortly, because this is how we're going to bridge the gaps. We have to bridge this gap in a higher order of magnitude. Now we can't know with the details. We have to have the detail of knowing by connection. And the limitations that we have with our self-serving attitude is limiting us to this planet, because we keep taking the energy from others. And this is an abuse. And what's missing, the missing ingredient, is the morality. And so where is the factor? The factor is that there are consequences. So the double cross that you cross is your eternal burden. And so the ethos of the universe is really what is missing. The creation comes from the combination of morality, compassion, and courage, non-physicals. And so when we look at the universal cup and we see our physical destination is manifest through our dynamic transfer states. And we know that these dynamic transfer states operate on different levels. And we have to see, we are now going from a stacker unit to the universal cup. And understand that the universal cup comes from the interdependence of all of us. What goes around comes around. And that's why when you look at the emblem of the Universal Council, you find that the environment, it doesn't matter if it's in the Rift Lakes or if it's in the Great Lakes, it doesn't matter. What matters is the universal rules. The universal rules are what feed us, the soul food that we need. When we tune into the universe and turn on to the energies that it gives, and then we drop out from our physicality in terms of dominating. It's not the survival of the fittest. It has to do with the survival of the energy, where you provide the pattern, you get the energy, and that's how you receive, because the universe provides. And the independent variable is our dream state. What we all dream of is what patriots fight for all the time. You can't have patriots in one country and have patriots in another country. Does not compute. What we're looking for, this is the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute. We are producing the plasma science, putting in public domain, because world peace is mandatory. To achieve physical and emotional harmony, you have to have physical and emotional vitality. This is the knowledge that the knowledge seekers get. And then the knowledge seekers find the truth. But do we have the courage to become difference makers? Difference makers are universal patriots. They have the universal language of knowing. And this is why the plasma science needs to be delivered in exchange for peace on Earth. Thank you for allowing me to make this presentation today. I hope you enjoyed the stories.
Well, thank you, Alex. That was quite a fish story, but I think it has a lot of lessons in there that we will unravel over time. I know I had cichlids at one time, but they've always seemed rather aggressive to the other fish, even to each other. But I guess on the other hand, they also work together with other species, and this is what we're going to be doing over time in the universe as we start to share knowledge. So thank you very much. And even though they look different and appear different, we're going to be able to work with them and share and probably develop things together. Maybe we'll even bring that back here to some of these species who tend to peck at each other. And maybe they'll learn to work together more. But I do agree, our DNA or our manifestation is going to have to be done in a rather quick pace and not over millions or billions of years to find the exact location for the eyes and the nose and so many other things. But this is going to happen, and we're going to experience this, and hopefully it humbles us more. Although I know Mr. Keshe said that some of us traveling into the universe may become a little bit arrogant about the whole situation, like we've achieved something, or I don't know exactly. I'll have to listen to that again, but hopefully we all stay humble and share the knowledge willingly without any sort of thinking we have an advantage over someone else because we've done something that they haven't done. But I'll open the floor up and see if we have any other comments about this different teaching that we had today in so many ways, but I thank you for it. So if anyone would like to share what they've just heard or something along these lines, please feel free to open your mics. And I don't know if I missed the whole point, Alex, or gosh.
Well,
haven't-
I would like to say this.
Yes, please.
I enjoyed the hobby very well. You wonder why so many people are into gardening. It's very peaceful. It's very rewarding. And one of the most rewarding things is to keep things growing. You know, you plant something and it grows. And that's, you know, the people with the green thumb, they have tremendous satisfaction. And people who don't have a green thumb, they run out to the garden center and buy the plants minutes before the pond tour arrives, right? Because there's a lot of prestige to being able to demonstrate to people that you can keep things alive. But what I found is that the garden people, the fish people, as well as the farmers, really don't care too much about the environment. They care more about being able to share stories. They care more about, you know, knowing the names. But now it's gotten to the point they don't care about the names. I want the most expensive fish. I want the big expensive fish, or just, you know, add water, instant aquarium, and back to the video games. The gardeners, you know, basically the same thing. My garden has to look immaculate, but how artificial is that? And you know, you want your backyard to be beautiful, but we know that the rest of the planet is having problems. I'm missing a slide. One of the slides is on the tines. One of the problems we have with this agricultural plowing is the problems with liquid manure. And so we had a problem was that we had to get rid of the liquid manure, which is a big problem when they had the flooding in the Mississippi River. It came from the liquid manure. And one of the ways that we get rid of liquid manure is we put injectors on the end of the tines on the plows. And one of the communities here in Canada found that the liquid manure ended up in the drinking water. Things we do. We colorize the fish. We colorize the plants. We genetically modify the fish, all for the sake of money. And there's no substance. There's no knowledge. We've even forgiven that. We don't do the knowledge anymore. There are no Latin names anymore. In fact, one of the pond fish is called a koi. It comes from Japan, where in Japan they figured out that a food fish is $10 and an ornamental fish is $75,000. So that's where the hobby has gone. But then, you know, you find that people come to you and they ask you for a koi fish. In Japanese, koi is fish. So they're literally asking you for a fish. Or they come to you and they talk about chitlets. So right away, you know, they know nothing about the hobby. If they know nothing about the hobby, they know nothing about the environment. And if they know nothing about the environment, then you know they don't care. And you know all these things. You don't have to ask them. They basically tell you through their actions. Actions speak louder than words. And so this is the thing that really bothered me the most about being in that business. I thought people would care about the environment more because they had to care about keeping plants and animals alive. And I didn't even talk about pets. I talked about the fish pets, you know. But we learned a rule there, didn't we? You don't play hockey in the kitchen. That's a rule. But you know, these other rules, we're not learning these other rules, and it's time that we learn it. We've hit a watershed moment where we realize that the knowledge and education that we've had is not enough, and it's limited. So take off the limitations, take off the blinkers, and look around and see how life works. And you'll see that it is interdependent. So the fish depend on the water hyacinths. The algae depends on the water hyacinths. The water quality depends on that. All things work in combination. You cannot extract that rocky biotope from Lake Malawi because the plants don't grow in water that is over, let's say, half a meter deep. The plants grow in water that is maximum a meter or less. And it is the plants on the periphery of the lake that keeps that lake clean. And so when you go to a fish hobbyist and you see, oh, this is my natural hobby, and they will be almost violent in their demonstration of their knowledge. And then you look at the brown algae and you say, okay, I'm not going to argue with you. Good luck keeping your fish alive. And so a lot of people think, you know, with the limitation of the knowledge, if more fish die, then more fish are needed. And it's called business. It's not the way. There's no morality going down that path. What do you think, Mark?
Yes, I think we've all been taught that we think wealth is in the pocket, but and we've all, everywhere we look, it appears, not everywhere, but for most people, that is why they're working, and that is why they're struggling to get something, to get a little bit more of the same. So I think, though, we're learning, and we'll have to show the others. I don't want to say they're wrong, because that's all they understand. It's just like if I say, well, how come you're not using zero-time communication now? Because no one has taught us. And this is probably one of the first times in our lives we've ever heard. I mean, not just today, but within this foundation, that you can actually communicate through your soul, where most of us would just say no. So it's the same with the money and most of our activities. We haven't been taught the correct way, or it's been hidden from us over the years by the entire structure of education and science and the clergy. We haven't been allowed to flourish, so to speak, in a way that's maybe not aggressive, and it doesn't have a profit motive.
I want to
because, yeah, go ahead.
What I wanted to do was to add to one of your concerns is with respect to the point of today's class. What has come out is that it is possible for us to change our environment by extending our environment. So imagine if you could jump out of the fish tank into the air and not shrivel up and die. So if the plasma field could extend beyond, shall we say, the transportation vehicle, so we not only transport our physicality, but we transport our environment at the same time. So we have our environment within another environment, right?
Yes,
And so this has come up.
Yes, we saw that drawing in the workshop.
On Thursday.
Yeah, where, well, and the one before too, I think, didn't
Oh,
you
yes,
say
that's right.
about extending the tent of the ship so that we could walk as we would for hundreds of kilometers in every direction? So yes, there are so many things we don't know, but apparently we have a beautiful teacher that's going to show us the way step by step.
And so if a baby is born, it goes from a water environment to an air environment, and it does that in very short order. But you know, we know that if you go from an air environment into the water environment, you'll drown. And so there's something wrong with this picture. Either, you know, it's our understanding or it's our acceptance. And, you know, this is where the teaching has to go. There's something different, you know, going on. And what we're realizing is that we've always had this capability, but there are some limitations that are put on our capabilities. So when we look at the vertical enhancement or the horizontal enhancement units and the combination thereof, these are going to be assists for us to be able to go into the new fields of knowledge. Do you agree?
100%. 100%. It's a new toy for us to play with, to start realizing what can be done on our own. But again, it's a training system. It's a practice system. And hopefully these units will be getting out more and more so we can take advantage of the knowledge that's being put to us through these systems. Or Mr. Kesh says, I've given you new toys to play with.
Yes, sir.
And even though it's the most advanced, I mean, gosh, it's breathtaking in a way that we're actually going to be moving around the universe, and it doesn't always have to be with the ship. Your body can stay here, and as we see with the dream state, I think you can interact and teach and share all across the universe. And then maybe when you find a position you'd like to relocate to, if it's all agreeable amongst all the souls, you'll be able to spend some time there and even come back and share the knowledge. And he said not in thousands of or hundreds of years, but instantaneously. So again, beyond our wildest imaginations.
Yeah, but you know, Mark, we can't leave people behind.
No, they'll be looked after.
We have to, we have to keep teaching.
Alex,
Hi, John.
hi, hello. I love your reasoning. Everybody loves to go to the seaside, and which is the biggest water closet on earth.
Absolutely. Thank you, John.
We're going to get a watershed for John as well, so he can keep serving his community down there, our community.
I think Alex didn't finish his teaching today. He said he had a missing slide. And we know he told the best fish story in the world. So Alex, what happened to the one that got away?
That was the
There's something
tines.
fishy there, yeah.
We saw the tines. This is where he was plowing the field. But
It was the one with the injectors on the tines.
oh, okay. Yeah, I'd never heard of that before. Was this runoff from animal farms that which was causing this pollution?
Well, when you say runoff, when you inject the liquid manure into the ground, I wouldn't call that runoff.
Okay, I misunderstood. Okay.
But I will tell you one thing. Maybe if I can just add, now that you reminded me, I was watching the Synodontus. You understand? I was watching the Synodontus. It took me 2 years to get this to a breeding colony size. And I witnessed this live. And the way to do it is in total darkness with a red light, because this is done at night, okay? And I watched this for 3 hours, and it was amazing. And to see the look on that female's face when these Synodontids came in, it was priceless. And I witnessed this. It was very a special event. And I went home very satisfied, came back in the morning. All the fish were dead. $800 worth of livestock within 12 hours. How do you think I felt?
Not the happiest camper on the block.
I turned off the lights. I left the room and I didn't come back for a couple of weeks. I was so disgusted because this was, this was sort of the maraschino cherry on top.
Yeah.
You have all this knowledge that you're learning, and you make mistakes, and that teaches you how to do things better. And then here it was, the pinnacle, and I needed the money to help pay for the rent. I mean, that's why people were doing the fish hobby, but they died. And then when I came back 2 weeks later, I found a copper residue in all the rivers that I had, because the water was coming from the mains, you see. It was circulating from the mains. And at that time, in those 2 weeks, there was a crisis, and about half a dozen people died. About 6 people died from water poisoning. And what had happened was, it was in a farming community, and no one would fess up. No one would own up to what had happened. And what I found out later, it was an agricultural calamity. But what the people in the water treatment plant did, because what had happened was that one of them was charged with murder, or actually charged with incompetence. I'm sorry, charged with incompetence. And this had never happened since Christopher Columbus, that you could do a job and be charged with incompetence. You could be fired, but actually to serve jail time for being incompetent on your job. And we're not talking about politicians here, corrupt politicians or something like that. We're just talking about someone doing their job the way they've been told. But the problem was, they didn't put enough chemicals in the water. And but they put in as many chemicals as they were told.
What do you mean, to sequester the copper? Is that
No,
what-
to
okay.
purify the water. And so one of the chemicals they threw in was copper sulfate. And they threw in enough copper sulfate in the water to kill my fish. And I wasn't the only one. There was a major catastrophe in the whole industry right across the province, because every water treatment plant did the same way. So it was an agricultural problem. They threw in added chemicals into the water over and above the regular chemicals they threw in. And, I learned a valuable lesson, that I had to have a self-contained system, that I couldn't depend on the system that I was paying taxes for. And, but how I found that out was when I seen the green residue, which was not algae. It was that color, that you see on the top of churches with the copper flashing. That green color. It's a special color. It's unique, and you know what it is. And that's not the first time that's happened. We had another incident where we had West Nile disease, and they threw a chemical into the water stream to deal with that. Oh man, when I think about how many fish died.
Yeah, we know our ways have continued to mess things up here on this planet, as Mr. Kesh says in the message to humanity. You've messed things up for millions of years, right? Sometimes we don't think we are, but we are.
Well, the thing is that, we have these solutions all around. So something is, something is missing. And not only is the knowledge missing, but fundamentally the morality is missing, because when you have the morality, you will get the knowledge. That's, because you have to look in that direction. You actually have to turn around and see what's going on and understand that, wait a second, the system's broken. It's not working. Change. You have to change. Can't keep doing the same thing. You know what that means. So this is how we move forward, and we learn and we understand. And you know, the biggest learning of all is that little tiny red dot that we call home. And we compare that to the rest of the universe, and you say, oh, that's why the Kesh Foundation is a spaceship institute. Okay, because there's so much more out there and it's waiting for us.
Alex, my problem with the water that I mentioned beforehand is I use natural fountain water, which is beautiful water, because the water we have here from the main plant that processes the water, they can't get the Roundup out of the water. It's full of Roundup Ready, which is used in agriculture, and it goes into the streams, and that's cancerous stuff. The people are dying from cancer here through drinking the water.
Yeah, exactly, John. And we have so many examples of this everywhere that, you know, we could be forever recounting all of these things. So we don't need to look anymore, because we now need to look for the solutions, and the solutions are there. But we have to increase our knowledge, and our knowledge is limited because of a variety of reasons that are restricting us. But if we can bridge this knowledge by knowing, then we can incorporate some of the new knowledge. So the basic knowledge we have, it's the cups of life. Make the cups of life. Build the peace stone. That is your transcendent energy. That is the message. Thanks a lot, Joe.
And again, many well-trusting and believing souls, you know, in Christianity, for example, they say, you know, God said, I made the man in the image of myself. We agree to that. But it also, God said, I gave man dominion over nature. And I thought that was a good thing, but now I'm seeing we really need to work with nature, and we really shouldn't take dominion over nature per se, where we're the top of the heat and we'll dictate to the rest below us because we're made like God, but not the rest. So there's a lot of misnomers that are put out across the spectrum that allows us to think we're justified in doing many of the things we do. And many times it's innocent and it's through a belief, but a wrong belief. So I think this technology will help, as we know, with the plasma water, to bring things back into a balance. And when we stop eating and doing many of these, or less of it here, you'll see that the species curtail their actual production of themselves, because they know they're not going to be eaten. And the same right across the spectrum. So there's a lot to learn and a lot to do, and a lot of work that still needs to go on this planet. And hopefully the ones that remain will be doing it, especially if some of the population leaves. But I think before they leave, to a greater extent, we'll have to get things in the right position here, and a better understanding of how to take care of one another. As Mr. Kesh says, all life has to be respected. Anyone else would like to jump in for a moment? Come on in, the water's fine. And there was another announcement in Telegram that I think Keaton had put in there about the conference in Las Vegas, Nevada. It says there's and this is for November 4th to 7th, just about 30 days or so away, at the Golden Nugget Hotel. And it's a cosmic consciousness and disclosure. and Mr. Kesh will be speaking there. I don't know which day. It's the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, and the 7th, it looks like. And of course, today and yesterday, the exhibition was open today, wasn't it? It just wasn't Saturday. I think it was today as well, the 2nd and 3rd.
Yeah, the workshop is covering 2 days.
And again, he's trying to reach some of these, well, he said there would be a small group of knowledge seekers there. And I don't know if they're just doing a dry run or other people will stop in, or they're getting things prepared for when the doors, so almost like a dress rehearsal, perhaps. Not that Mr. Kesh needs any rehearsing anytime, but maybe the rest of us do.
No, I think the rehearsing is done. I think the show started yesterday. The reports will be coming in soon enough.
Alex, hi, it's Dean here. Can I make some comments on this? Obviously, I was present over the last couple of days, but I can't disclose too many things. But
No,
there's been
just stay within your range, please.
yeah, I'm going to stay within my range. So there were many nationalities that have travelled and were present, Alex, and it was a joy to see certain individuals present within the environment of the new exhibition and TV studios in Linz that have been publicly announced by Mr. Kesh and are now officially opened. It was there are some new technologies that have been shown, as in physically shown, as in units, but I can't disclose anything about that. And so the exhibition centre was filled with knowledge seekers that were there that had much knowledge between them, but also started to share their knowledge again amongst themselves, amongst ourselves. There were many different communications where we had groups of, we had some UC members there that were present in physicality, and it was great for the UC members to meet and to actually, we work on a soul level, and we all speak to each other through these channels, Zoom and various other channels that we speak to each other through all the time. But it was still wonderful to actually meet in physicality, and you find that when you meet somebody in physicality, you sometimes have a different impression, a different feel strength to what you perceive through hearing a voice and having an interaction on this sort of level. And when you actually meet the physicality, sometimes misconceptions can be changed, and the feel strength, as I've just said, can be completely different to what you imagined. Sometimes you get a part of the transfer of energy through one aspect that you are viewing from when you just hear a voice. But when you physically are present with another being, there's a different field interaction, and because we're in a matter state and we are still very present on the planet, we experience different emotions, I think, when we actually have a tangibility to an encounter. We are very physical beings. We exist in a very slowed down field on this planet, a very condensed field. That we've grown to experience this matter state, this slow down field. And as I said, it's a totally different experience to. As I said, just speaking to somebody and hearing a voice on a physical level, I think the interactions are, because we're so used to it, we gather more field strength, and we gather more actions sometimes. And also there's a deep connection with the physicalities of people meeting. We are all a big soul family, and we all speak to each other on a regular basis through these platforms. And we've all grown to know each other's voices and experience each other's field strengths. But on this material plane, on this planet that we're on, as I said, I think this is part of the equation of what you were speaking about, even with the fish analogy. We were born as a fish. We spent 9 months of our life as a fish in our mother's womb, and we experienced being in a different environment. And then we come out of this position and start gasping for air. And so we go from one state to another state in a very short period of time. And I think this is a bit like the analogy of the center opening up. It's like being there's a new birth happening with this exhibition center, and the exhibition center will be a starting position for many other centers that are going to open up all across the planet, and everybody will start to experience many teachings and many interactions on not only on a soul level, but on a physical level as well. And then these teachings can spread to the different generations. It can open up many aspects of the knowledge to the younger generations that can come in and experience, not only through channels of, as I'm saying now, like this channel that we're speaking through now, but in physicality. They can actually come in and experience plasma, feel the fields on their physical bodies, because we can explain many things to people in many different ways. But until a physical body experiences and senses the feeling of plasma on its physical nano-coated skin structure, the 3 layers of the skin, sometimes it's hard for certain beings to accept the fields, or come to terms with the fact that there are other dimensions beyond what the physical body construct feels. So this structure that's taking place right now, and has been put in place by Mr. Kest from a very long time ago, is now reaching a point where I'm struggling for the right words here, but like critical mass, where we're getting to a point where many knowledge seekers have come together, the field strength is gathered, and now the knowledge is about to bloom all across the planet, and not only in communications through social media and these sort of field strengths on this sort of platform, but also in tangibility as well. And so this is going to make, I think, a big difference. And when people start to experience, when many souls, when they walk into, well, it felt from my point of view, from my personal experience, that when people walked into the exhibition, even aged knowledge seekers that know the technology very well, when they come in and they see, they experience all the technologies that we've all come to know and love, all around the building, it gathers in a field strength and positions them so that they want to know more, they want to give more, they want to take this even further to their nations and to their direct families and the communities that they work and respond within. And it was a great pleasure to see the smiling faces today of many individuals, many souls, and just the joy, seeing the joy in people's faces of knowledge sharing that was shared. And there's obviously knowledge sharing when it's in a conference environment where certain knowledges are shared in a different way, that then that transcends the soul receives that field strength. And even though I can't share anything now directly for obvious reasons, but the field has been transferred to me. I've felt it, and the soul has responded to it. And in times to come, then this knowledge that I've gathered will be shared again, and the filtering process will take place once more, where it will get transmuted and what's the right word? Will be communicated in many different ways, because we can cut things many times, and we can have an interaction where the fields rub together, as we know, like the planet Earth and the sun and all the fields in between. And once that interaction happens, and we get that spark of life, that spark of soul interaction, that spark of physicality, many things start to happen. And all the souls are wonderfully aware of all of this. And as we know, the tangibility of the physicality is catching up. And I think in many aspects within the design center, from many of the people that I experienced that were present, they are very, very aware. And they're at a level now that that beauty will be shown. I think, and Mr. Keshe has said this many times, he's here to show this time. He's here to for people to experience it, and to really to feel a difference, to really be present with this technology, not only by the field strength that you have, where you've made these technologies yourself at home, but also through Mr. Keshe's endeavors, that many of the tools and many of the devices that have been placed and are being placed all around the planet will be available for people to physically experience. And then for the elevation of the soul's interactions around their environment and within themselves will be of a different nature. And I think this is going to be a very joyous, wonderful time for humanity. And I really look forward to all these centers opening up across the planet. There was a situation today where there were some knowledge seekers that gathered around, and they had a very big one cup, one life. And there was different nationalities present, and each nationality had some of the one cup, one life that they had personally with them. And this was added to this bigger cup. And so we all, with some thoughts and intentions, put some of our one cup, one life into this bigger one cup, one life. And so all the different nationalities brought this together. And with this interaction and this giving, and then these waters will then be dispersed and given back to other people. So there will be this this sharing of the peace dome in another way, in another field strength. That so everybody makes their own individual cup. We shared it into one big cup, and then this big cup is then redistributed amongst people. And then once they spray this into the atmosphere, then you have another field strength of many nationalities and many different interactions within that particular environment that you're going to give into. So you're going to be spreading not only your own thoughts and intentions, but the thoughts and intentions of the other nations that have put into this big cup. I know this isn't physicality, but once sprayed into the atmosphere, we know that this sharing of the beauty will enhance and bring about this wonderful peace dome that many of you I know have been spreading for some time now. And so I feel that this will be another contribution to bringing about a very gentle and beautiful way of bringing this peace, because we are messengers of peace. And I think this will bring this forward in a most spontaneous, beautiful way that will enhance many, many environments across this planet. So it was a wonderful experience. I've gone around, I've sort of sugarcoated it a little bit there, but I'll give you some information without really giving anything away. So I've sort of give you some feel strength of what it was like to be present in the exhibition centre with the souls that came, that the souls were aware of already been placed to be part of this, like you guys are here right now. Your soul has positioned you to be part of this, and I thank you for that, because it's a wonderful experience listening to you, Alex, and to Mark, and all the souls that present and share this knowledge openly and freely. And it is that learning process that gradually that field strength will transcend and reach across all of humanity. That just like the plasma waters that we spray on Sundays, this will in the moments to follow, this will reach every single soul, and we will find this peaceful transition to the next stage for all the souls that are present within this small little sphere that we call the blue planet Earth, which is just one little tiny plasma amongst a multitude of universal plasmas in every scale, from micro to macro, that transcend and move across this vast unicos that we are a tiny, tiny fraction of. And we are experiencing this wonderful little plasma within ourselves that is basically a huge universe, and all the way back to the ultimate position of taking the position back with the whole of creation. So anyway, thank you for listening. I think I'll leave it there. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Dean. Yes, I sense these fields will start to build. I mean, they're already extending across the planet, but as they build up, they'll be stronger and go across the parking lot, and then the city of Linz, and then the country of Austria. And as these centers or different centers get put together, they're all going to link up with this dome. So I think it's very beautiful. Thank you for all your contributions, Dean, and all your work.
No, you're very welcome, Mark. Thank you, Mark. Thank you all. Honestly, it was very special, as it always is with all these conferences that are opened up. There's always a wonderful atmosphere, and it's like a gathering of in physicality of the beautiful souls that know this and have experienced it, and have I don't know what the right word is, but are yeah, I do know the right word, present souls that are present in every moment, like each and every one of you are right in this very moment. And sometimes it can be, we find within our communities, we feel a little bit isolated sometimes, because the plasmas around us, the souls around us, don't always experience what we experience from our point of view. And so we are walking GANs ourselves, as we know, but we can project the thoughts and intentions, and we can radiate out the one cup, one life just with a thought. So I can reach across to where you are in your very position right now with the thought of spraying the plasma waters and giving into your environment, and you could do the same to mine. And we can, so like in the physicality that I spoke about earlier, where we were physically putting the water in, we can also do this too with just a thought, and give back and enhance and bring about this condition of peace all across the planet. Showing that the manure there, the liquid manure, very true. In agriculture, it's the same thing. There was some interactions with some people today to do with agriculture, and that's very beneficial and very beautiful too. And I think this will be, if you can put plasma into this position, then a bit like when we put the plasma waters down into the drains, as Jalal has said in the past, and the amount of bacteria, microbes and everything, if you think of the trillions and trillions of microbes that you are feeding and giving the plasma to, that are souls, because every single being, every single cell is a soul, and all equal, none higher, none lower. So even this liquid manure is a soul. and there's many billions of souls within it. So if we spray the plasma waters into these souls, then this transition will be more intense and a quicker transition. It will happen in another way. We know that time doesn't exist outside of this planet, but in these slowed down fields that we exist in, that so we have a matter state condition where it seems to take longer. It's like when we as we know, Mr. Kesh has said to us many times that when we look into the night sky, we see a star, and for us that star is in the night sky for a whole lifetime, and for us we think that is a fixed position. But to that being in the transition period, as in the star, they could be traveling at zero time communication, and so it's for want of a better word, warp speed. They are traveling from one end of the universe to the other, and in no time at all. But for us, it seems a very long time. So this transition period we can speed up by sharing the plasma waters, and we will lighten and enhance this present planet very, very quickly. So the more you can spray and with your intentions share this, not only this knowledge but the plasma, the sooner we will change the whole condition across the planet. And yes, that's right, they're Great Lakes. I mean, in every we know that many knowledge seekers have been spreading these plasma waters now for quite some time. So the plasma waters are across the planet already. So it's already in transition. It's just a matter for us in our matter state condition of experience it in a position that feels quick enough for us to accept the change that is part of us, that is us, that is the transition to a plasmatic state from a fixed position of the matter state. So anyway, thank you, Mark. So I didn't mean to go on again. Then
No, that's fine. I had a question, just a curiosity, and then we'll go to Lissy. She has her hand up. While you were walking through the parking lot, or maybe on the roof, did you see any lights or perhaps any crafts that may be landing there? I think our friends from the universal community will not feel threatened in the exhibition, and we may see some of them appear, whether they land with a craft or maybe they can just manifest themselves there. So be on the lookout. I just had this very strong sense that they'll be welcome there and they won't be threatened at all.
Mark, I do believe, and I sense this, having been present, that yes, I totally agree with you. And one thing I will share is, and I'm not, so one of the evenings when I left the center, I always notice certain environments around me. I was very aware of my environment and the conditions. And I did notice a very, very unusual position of a certain cloud. And with the knowledge that we know, and we've been shared many times, we know that certain craft do tend to hide within certain cloud formations. And there was a distinct cloud formation that I've not seen before on a very big scale. And I remember distinctly thinking to myself, hello, it's wonderful to be present with you. And so, yeah, very much so, Mark.
Thank you, Dean.
Present in every moment.
Thank you for helping prepare the party.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, I'll let Liz. Thank you, Mark.
Go ahead, Lissy.
Thank you, Dean.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you very much. Your beautiful teachings. Thank you so much. Thank you, Alex.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, and thank you everybody for coming. Hello, Alex, and thank you for all the time you donate, you love, and you knowledge for us. I have a question, but my question is very long, and I prefer the people translate for me. Maybe John or Patricia. Thank you.
Do we have someone to translate for Lissy?
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Hablando de agricultura, porque
Talking
es el
about
tema,
agriculture, it's the theme.
el tema hoy son las plánticas.
The thing that we're talking today. Sigue hablando, yo traduzco.
Sí, sí, sí.
That we're talking about the plants.
Estaba pensando que hay
I was
algunos
thinking that there's some things,
animales
some
y
animals,
algunas
and
plantas
some
que
plants.
quiero saber si estas
I would like
plantas
to know if these plants
se adaptaron al sistema
adapted to the system
o por defenderse, como las
or
plantas carnívoras, por
or
ejemplo.
defending
Y
themselves. For example, the plants that are
pensando
carnivorous.
los
I was
caracoles
thinking
africanos
about the African snails
que le hacen daño a las plantas y de
that
hecho en
harm the
Cuba
plants.
hay un animal, hay una pez
Pests
destruye como que grandes áreas de cultivos
that
alrededor
destroy
de
lots
los
of
ríos. Entonces,
um,
quiero saber si estas
agricultural fields
estas
around
plantas
the
y estos
rivers.
animales
I would like to know if these plants and these
los
animals
se modificaron para adaptarse al ambiente
were modified to
que
adapt to the environment
destruyen a sus propios seres.
because they are destroying their own beings.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Patricia.
You're welcome.
Could you just state that question? We missed some of it because you were both, you were trying to translate and you were doing a beautiful job.
She
Go
was
ahead.
asking, Lizzie was asking if these plants and animals that destroyed their environment got adapted to the environment, if that is what happened. Because, for example, the plants that eat meat or the animals along the rivers and all that, if they adapted themselves to survive. That was her question.
Yeah, I'm prepared to wade into that.
Estoy preparado para entrarle a eso.
Let me talk about an example. We talked about migration.
Déjame hablar sobre un ejemplo. Hablamos sobre la migración.
In Africa, there are wildebeest that migrate from the South Africa into the interior of Africa.
En África hay ciertas bestias que se migraron de una parte de África a la parte sur de África.
And as you know, with the changing seasons, that sometimes the where there's a lot of water, suddenly it becomes desert. So the animals have to move with the changing of the season.
Entonces, con el cambio de estaciones, hay muchas áreas que de tener mucha agua se convierten en desierto. Entonces, estos animales se tienen que ir adaptando a esto.
Some of the countries have decided to put up fences, and in that process, they restrict the migration.
Entonces, muchos de los países decidieron poner cercas y entonces ahí restringieron la migración.
So if you understand, during the migration, the animals, as they go, they nibble on the plants.
Entonces, tú comprendes que cuando están en una migración, los animales cuando están pasando están comiendo de estas plantas. The thing is, Alex, I'm translating to the Hispanic community. There's 20 of us.
So the plants, to protect themselves,
Entonces las plantas para protegerse,
they secrete a chemical,
entonces ellos secretan un químico.
and that chemical is tannic acid.
Y ese químico es ácido tánico.
And this tannic acid is the same type of chemical that they use in the preparation or in the clothing industry for making leather.
Entonces este químico es el mismo que utilizan en la industria del cuero para tratar el cuero.
Yeah, so the tannic acid makes the leather more durable.
Entonces el ácido tánico hace que el cuero sea más duradero.
So in this period of adaptation is between when the animal eats it and when the plant secretes.
Entonces, en este periodo de adaptación es cuando el animal lo consume y la planta lo secreta.
So as the animal is migrating, it nibbles on the plant, but it doesn't have tannic acid in the plant material.
Entonces, hasta a medida que el animal se come la planta, la come, pero no tiene el ácido tánico como material la planta.
So what I call the predatory distance, that is how far can the animal migrate before it has to nibble another plant.
Entonces, lo que yo llamo la distancia predatoria es cuánto tiene que transcurrir desde que este animal comió de una planta hasta que tenga que volver a comer de la otra planta.
So the plant, to defend itself, once it gets eaten, or once the animal starts to eat the plant starts to secrete this tannic acid.
Entonces, como mecanismo de defensa, la planta comienza a secretar este ácido tánico para que no lo sigan comiendo.
And what they found was that the surrounding plants of the same species were also secreting tannic acid.
Entonces, lo que encontraron fue que las especies que estaban alrededor también estaban secretando ácido tánico.
Okay, so how do these plants communicate? Because they don't have mouths to speak and they don't have ears to hear.
Entonces, ¿cómo es que estas plantas se comunican? Porque no tienen bocas para hablar y oídos para oír.
And how does the animal know not to eat the plant, but migrates farther to where the plants are still, shall we say, without the chemical?
Entonces, ¿cómo sabe el animal que tiene que caminar más para poder consumir plantas que todavía no tienen el ácido tánico?
The bottom line is that the animals can eat the plant without killing the plant.
La idea principal es que los animales pueden consumir las plantas sin destruir las plantas.
When they put the fences in, the animals couldn't migrate.
Entonces, cuando pusieron las cercas, los animales no podían migrar.
So they had to eat the plant in the same area that they ate the first one.
Entonces, ellos tenían que consumir las plantas en el mismo área donde estaban consumiendo las primeras.
Then suddenly they found that these wildebeest were dying.
Entonces, de repente se dieron cuenta que estos animales se estaban muriendo.
When they did the autopsy, they found that the stomach was like leather.
Entonces, cuando hicieron la autopsia, se dieron cuenta que los estómagos eran como cuero.
And the leather lining of the stomach could not assimilate the food.
Y el estómago, como estaba tratado como un cuero en tratamiento, no podía asimilar la comida.
So instead of digesting the food, it would just sit there and rot in their stomach.
Entonces, en vez de hacer digestión, la comida con digestión, simplemente la comida se quedaba ahí y se podría dentro del estómago.
So despite the fact that there were all these plants around, the animals died of starvation.
Entonces, aunque habían suficientes plantas alrededor, estos animales se murieron de desnutrición.
So you can see that with man's intervention, by putting limitations, it has upset this natural balance.
Entonces podemos ver cómo cuando el hombre interviene y pone limitaciones, interrumpe este balance en la naturaleza.
So this example shows the communication between the plants from one plant to another.
Entonces este ejemplo enseña la comunicación que existe de una planta a la otra.
And it also shows the communication from the plant to the animal.
Y también enseña la comunicación de una planta al animal.
So the plant is saying, yeah, you can eat me, but the other plant says, no, you can't eat me.
Entonces una planta dice, sí, tú me puedes consumir, y la otra planta le dice, tú no me puedes consumir.
And then there's a communication from animal to animal saying, you know, guys, we got to move.
Y después hay comunicación entre un animal y el otro, y le dice, ¿saben qué? Nosotros tenemos que seguirnos moviendo.
So if you base your communication on your physicality, then you're missing the show.
Entonces, si tú basas tu comunicación en tu fisicalidad, entonces te estás perdiendo parte del show.
I hope that example is answering your question, because it's a great
Ellos,
question.
yo espero que ese ejemplo esté contestándote tu pregunta, porque es una buena pregunta.
Yes, thank you so much. Mark, I sent the video in the North American team, but I don't know can discuss about that topic or for restriction not. Thank you.
Yes, I'd rather not play it unless I've seen it or someone else has seen it. Do you want to discuss what you were alluding to or referring to without actually showing the video at this point? Perhaps we can bring it next week.
Oh, okay, maybe.
But tell
Yes,
us what your thinking is and why
It's
you wanted to.
about the global impact, the agricultural. So the situation now, but it's crazy. But I don't know for the limitation on YouTube or whatever.
Okay.
That topic is or in private. I don't know.
Can I make a comment on that, please?
Excuse me.
Can I make a comment?
Response.
Mark.
So yes.
Okay, yes, it's just this is a highly political situation at this point in time, so I would wait for the initiative to come from the research center in Austria.
And we were informed last week, Alex, about these feeding units. And so he said we would send them to, if you do receive a package and it has the cache tape on there, you'll know what to do. And he said we'd be sending those to trusted knowledge seekers. So,
well, in direct response to Lissy's question, you see, like we have an anomaly, and that is that we can benefit the crop yields with agriculture, but at the same time, it's possible for us to minimize the need for eating food.
Agree.
So Alyssa's question is how are we going to adapt in the future? And I think this is the thing. We all have to understand that we're at a watershed moment where things that we have learned, decades ago may or may not apply today. Let me give you another case in point. There is a problem in Holland with respect to energy because they won't have the energy for their greenhouses.
I just saw that. You're absolutely correct, I think.
Yeah, but the problem is that answer was solved 60 years ago. Okay, so
Right.
we solved the problem, but the problem has come back again. Okay, so if you insist on doing things that way, well, as Mr. Kesh says, that's you want to go the way of the donkey, go right ahead. Have a nice trip.
And I think what you were referring to is they need energy to run these big generators or something that put the CO2 in greenhouses. And now with the energy being too expensive, they're shutting off these CO2 generators. But we know more. I think we've even covered this in one of Jalal's classes.
Yeah, I don't want to go too much on that subject.
No problem.
It's a very sensitive,
Yes,
very sensitive subject.
Everything seems to be very sensitive these days. Okay.
Listen, Mark,
Yes,
seriously,
yes.
seriously. You remember the biosphere experiment in Arizona, right? They were trying to do terraforming on Earth, and it ran this experiment for 2 years. Because
Yes, that was a long time ago. I vaguely
well,
remember.
yeah, we haven't learned anything since, and we had to inject oxygen. Think about that. So what audacity do we have? We cannot terraform on Earth, but we want to go terraform in Mars? Yeah, right. I don't think, well, let's put it this way. Our knowledge has to increase.
Well, the spraying of the Dome of Peace here may lead us into spraying the Dome of Life elsewhere, shall we say, once we know more about what we're doing.
Oh, yeah, that's well said. Thank you.
Selena,
Yes. Can I say something about this?
you don't have to ask on this platform. Everyone is equal. Everyone has a microphone. And if you're judicial or judicious about it, you just open it when you're sold.
Thank you. But my knowledge is very limited. But I want to say something about the hunger, Yes. So we are talking about the global warming and the latest situation, this and that. So before I told you guys, I have few experience somewhere else. So when I get those kinds of experience, I understood there is no hunger. We don't need food, that situation. But now we are alive, we are in material situations. So what can we do? So I think every day, if we try to slow our breathing, maybe 1 2 hour meditation, those kinds of things, we can reduce our hunger easy way. So if you guys want to try, anybody, they can. And there is other solution. We need to think natural way, not material way. We are part of nature, so everything we can make find solution if we think about part if we think we are part of nature and everything. So that way too. And I think so if we collect everybody's idea together, then we will find permanent solution. Yeah, I wanted to tell about those things. And another question for Alex: why you are showing the Mississippi River map? Is there something we need to know? It's for Alex.
Hello. The reason for the Mississippi map is because the Mississippi River was flooded several years ago. And the damage was incredible. I can't even, I don't think we've still recovered. But we were concerned about the pollution that would have come, say, from chemical plants or from gas stations. But what had happened, what year was it? Well, it was about 25, 30, between 25 and 30 years ago, there was a movement to buy up all the hog farms in North America. And one family out of Wisconsin succeeded. And so these hog farms went from, say, upwards to around 500 hogs per farm to 15,000 hogs per farm. So you can understand that the hogs generated a lot of manure. And so when they built the farms, they also had to build massive manure containment tanks. Well, during the flooding, these tanks overflowed. The problem with the liquid manure, we use manure as fertilizer, but that manure has been aged, you know, like whiskey. But if you use the raw components, it hasn't matured. And so this raw manure was what was polluted the environment. And this is all, you know, the entire, from the Great Lakes right down to, I think, what's at the top of the Great Lakes? Is it St. Louis? At the top of the Mississippi, Mark? It's St.
Not
Louis,
sure.
isn't it?
I'm not sure.
All the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. All of that was affected. It affected almost at least 25% of the landmass in the United States. So,
So it has to be conditioned before it can be used.
That's right. But they're spreading it, you know, right away, because the containment tanks are overflowing. They can't deal with it.
Gotcha.
Yes, understood. That's why is they're reducing agriculture, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. I was looking to decontaminate these places, and then I had a little problem with the owners, and morality came into play. So I walked away from that job. It would have been extremely wealthy, but you know, they crossed the line.
Yes. Do you know what? When I was in Bangladesh, there is protein like meat. Those thing was expensive, so people eat very less, like meat and chicken and those kinds of things. But when I came to America, oh my gosh, people eat every day, 3 times a day, 4 times a day. There's a lot of killing, and they are cruel to animal. So in my heart, always I felt pain for them, and I always wish. I never talked to anybody, but I felt in my heart, oh, maybe someday everything will be this much expensive, so people couldn't buy too much meat, and if they don't buy too much meat, animal would be safe. Less animal will be slaughtered. So maybe this is the day everything came back. I'm not that much sad. Everything expensive, getting expensive, at least for the meat. And I think people can make other way their protein, like mushroom and those kinds of stuff. I need to eat less. We eat too much, really.
Right, but the plants are in the same position. A lot of people think they're not killing because they're not eating animals, and then they have a bowl of salad. But as Mr. Kesh said, and I think it was in the Kids Knowledge Seekers workshop that we might have covered that. He went into the protein, and protein is the life. And just because they don't have a tongue, we don't hear them screaming, but it's the same situation. It's just
same
a different
situation.
Just a different strength of protein. Now, Lissy has put into the chat, maybe is the opportunity for the plasma technology use fields for food.
Yes.
One problem is big opportunity for use plasma technology for solutions. And if I could, I'd like to ask Jason. Are you with us, Jason? I was hoping he might review, because you were interacting with Mr. Kesh last week when you were asking him about these feeding systems, which he said the Kesh Foundation is in, it's not that they're going to create them, they're in possession of these feeding systems. And if certain ones were to use food to cause mayhem on this planet, he said they would be released in hours. Jason, would you like to add anything to that if you're still with us? I see your picture.
Mark, it's Dean here. Can I make a
Yes.
quick comment on
Oh,
what you've just
please.
said?
Anyone can, yes.
Can I just say that obviously what Liz has just expressed is very, very true. So that it's a bit like the situation we're having with the medical condition that's been placed on the planet. And this condition has brought about a new condition where humanity has come together, and many families are they spent long periods of time together, and it changed the dynamic. The emotion, emotion, and everything changed. And so when something ceases, or when something stops, a new creation is started. It's a bit like when a forest goes through a transitional period, and it's raised to the ground. But from the carbon release and the hydrogen that goes into the earth, you suddenly get an explosion of growth again, and it transforms and it mutates into a much more bigger and more beautiful entity. And it's going to be the same thing with anything that is used with the wrong intention. We'll find that in these moments, now that the plasma's here and the knowledge is here, that it will transmute into something beautiful, and it will grow and it will expand more and more. And the slowing down of the fields can also be in the opposite way as well. So if something is done in the wrong way, then the speeding up of the reversal can be equally just as beautiful. So there's something to consider there. So I think that's quite a relevant point that Lizzie brought up. Thank you, Lizzie. Thank you, Mark.
So Dean, this may help facilitate the transition period, let's say, if we do face some sort of mayhem in that area.
Absolutely. From this position, if mayhem is caused, then there will be the transition will be speeded up. There will be a dynamism, an emotion, a field strength gathered that will cause a condition that will bring about a change that will be on a bigger scale, and will be completely different. So one plasma, the stronger feeding the weaker, and vice versa. Because as we know, with the field strengths, it feeds itself, it loops back. So from something that is taken, the other will receive and feed back. So when it has a surplus and it has enough energy, then that transfer of energy will come back, and there will be a reversal, and it will be that new position will manifest much quicker. To my humble opinion.
Thank you, Dean.
Thank you, Mark.
Anyone else want to come in here? We're approaching midnight in Europe, and we want to thank all the Europeans for staying up so late. I did want to play a wish from the Universal Council from August, and a little clip on the Universal Council and the final disclaimer that will end the meeting. But we are still open for any comments or perhaps suggestions or questions you'd like to pose here.
Another subject. If we want to see our soul, there is one easy way to see. When we woke up from the sleep at the morning, we go to restroom, right? And the most of restroom, they have a mirror. Did you guys anytime felt if we saw the mirror, you saw your eyes, did you felt anything anytime different? Did you felt like this, somebody watching you? It's happened. It happened to me. So sometimes I ask myself, who are you watching that mirror?
You mean another entity or a presence you're sensing?
No, that is our soul. When we saw our eyes deeply in the mirror, that is our soul. Physicality is seeing the soul.
Would anyone like to comment or just listen? You can continue, Selena.
Yeah. So I felt that way. That is our soul, and it feels different. And sometimes I laugh. Sometimes I get scared. Sometimes it's different feelings. I think so. Most of us can feel that too. And another thing that I told you, if we slow everything, slow little bit, like 1-2 hours, we can save our energy and we can reduce our hunger. That is very important thing. We can practice that.
So you mean like when a bear goes into hibernation or something along that line where he goes into sort of,
Why we don't think about different way?
okay,
Maybe we go to the soul's in soul part, in the soul. That way we reduce our hunger, not hibernation. It is good inside the soul. We can go to our soul, and that way we can reduce our hunger. I know, I felt when I go other places, there is no hunger. So we have physical body, we can deny that, but we can reduce hunger that way, slowing everything. Maybe 2-hour meditation, slow breathing. At least we could try, right? Because the situation is very, very, is happening.
well, one of the things Mr. Kesh has taught that if we can feed the soul of the man, it can feed the soul of physicality without a problem. But the systems he's talking about are talking, I believe, about direct absorption of feeling.
Yes.
Into the physicality for even those who aren't aware of their soul and have not developed any self-awareness of the soul. They'll be able to enjoy these energies as well. And this is just the way I'm thinking, because I'm sure it's just not going to be for knowledge seekers. As he said, you could put it on a street pole, and anyone who comes under the street pole will be fed.
Yeah, that way too. We can try different way, right? And we are GANs.
Anything you'd like, yes.
I just have a question, Gail here. You know, this issue of when you're aware of something, that means it's in the physicality. So I get a little bit, not mixed up, but concerned that I'm not focusing on the soul of man, okay? But we end up with the soul physicality, which is a good thing in a way if we understand how to make them work together. And then it also brings me to the part of I'm using my hands above my head, and I have created a free soul, I guess. you know, how it just, it's a little tricky because physicality is involved. And you don't know if you're actually dealing with your, I call it the big soul, or if it's the soul of physicality. Thanks.
They're both working together. They're both aware of each other. They're in an uncomfortable, in a way, relationship, but yet we're going to merge them together with this technology so that we can do more things than we can now. But both souls are aware of each other. One has the evenings, more or less, and the night, the soul of the man, and during the day, the soul of physicality is basically the boss. And the soul of the man just has to observe. So I think it'll go the other way as well, where the soul of physicality will start observing more of the soul of the man.
And then also we have to make sure if the soul of the man is going to take on the role of, you know, invisibility, if you will, then we have to make sure that we're strong enough not to lose the physicality. And that is, you know, those are the issues that I'm battling with a bit now.
Yes, he did say at the point of arrival, you may have some issues with containing the soul of physicality and the soul of the man. And if they do separate, you'll experience what we call death on this planet. He said it's not all honey and hunky-dory, I think.
No, not at all. And then the other issue, the question that don't, you know, when you have the three fingers, the thumb and the two fingers, and you curl your little finger and the other finger to your palm, I'm trying to make sure I understand which one is which. Is the top of the reactor, the fourth part, your curled fingers into the palm, or is it the thumb that is the big guy? So I'm and the three fingers, like which one is which, the principle, the matter, and the what was the other one? Transition, principle, and the matter, I guess. So I'm trying to remember which one is which.
And if you look at your fingers, you see a line between the, as you go down your finger, you see one line, two lines. It looks
Which
like
finger?
any of the fingers. You can see three reactors on each finger, can't you?
No, I'll look
You
a
must
little
be
more
young
carefully.
with no lines.
Thanks.
Look at the finger and you'll see where the knuckle is. Each little knuckle,
yeah,
there's sort of a separation, and I think these are little reactors as well. But again, I'm no expert on this. Maybe Jalal would like to come in, and if he's still awake, it's getting to be midnight in Europe.
Yeah, it's getting late.
Mark, it's Dean here. I can make a comment if Jalal's not there. You just said about the fingers being reactors, and so you have the knuckles and everything. You have the joints, and as you said, that it's like a reactor. But also the three layers of the skin of man. So you have the nanocoating on the top, and then you have this transition layer, and then the inner layer of the skin. And but it's fascinating that every single human being, every that has a physicality, has this very unique, completely unique to the individual fingerprint. Now, why would this be? Why would it be so unique to you that only this one soul in physicality has this this particular pattern within the structure of the actual physicality of the hand of the structure, meaning that that it gives you a feel strength particular to yourself. And that feel strength you can would be that it would give you the ability to manifest a field that is exactly what you require. So when we have a physical, like when we see something with our physical eyes, it attracts us in a certain feel strength, a certain way. Certain people react to certain colors. Because from your viewpoint and from your perspective, that color interacts with you and gives you an emotion that you sense. So the same thing could be through the reactors of your hand, and this very unique pattern that you have within your structure. And this could be something that you could tap into and maybe experience different ways of using the reactor within your hand. And what Gail was speaking about from the knowledge that I've come to understand is that the thumb is the soul, and the thumb structure would be on your left hand, would be the soul of the oversoul, and the right hand would be the physicality. And the two fingers next to it, if we go into sort of like anything that we've seen with we say aliens, which are no one's really an alien. We're all floating around on a little blue planet that's in the middle of a ocean of universes, and we're a speck of dust, so we're all aliens. But the alien beings that were spoken about, they have 3 fingers. And the bottom 2 fingers don't tend to be there, so they would be folded in. So you just have the thumb, the forefinger, the middle finger, the index finger. And so this position could be beneficial to play around with your magnetic and gravitational fields, and to use to start to experience when you bring your hands together, as many of us have when we start to feel the fields between our hands, the plasmatic wind, and you feel the magnetical fields between your hands. And particularly if you excuse me, if you place some plasma water in the palm of your hand, and you gently place it in the palm of your hand, and then go outside into nature or something, and let this the tiny little bit of maybe a GANs and the plasma waters, and let it and go into nature with the right thoughts and intentions, and gently open your hand up and let this plasma water dry on the palm of your hand. Just let it dry, and then feel the just experience the plasma, because you are plasma as well, but then you're taking in a new field strength. And so if you let this dry into your hands, you will find that you may, I'm not saying everybody will, I'm not claiming anything, but you may start to experience some more energy fields between your hands when you concentrate them in a certain position, just slightly, I don't know, 6 to 10 inches apart or something, and then just hold your hands there and start to experience the field strength of the plasma that there are trillions of fields between your hands, and you have that magnetical gravitational field that you can, like in Tai Chi and many other things, where you can concentrate the fields and you can start to feel that plasma. You can feel the magnetic conditions between your hands. And so with the 3 fingers that I've just explained, the thought with the uniqueness of the skin, and then the beauty of that magnetic field, and then using a bit of GANs, maybe you will experience a new sense of what plasma can be and is indeed. Thank you, Mark.
Right. And in that same workshop, I think it's the 134th, and right after he starts talking about using your hands to create the plasma ball, he says, and if you're more advanced, you can start using the 2 halves of your brain to create this potential difference and the fields in the same manner.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. Yeah. Created, so you've got 2 spheres of the brain. I mean, and
Yeah,
it's the same
it's right
thing,
here.
isn't it?
Yeah, it's right
right
there
there.
in the same workshop. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's the same. It's like having the rubbing together of the fields. So in that infinity point in the middle, that the space gap is where all the beauty happens. And there's it's like the experiment Mr. Kesh brought many years ago, where he turned up with an empty box, the empty box of the universe, the space gap. And in those moments, none of us understood, well, some knowledge seekers did, it had the knowledge, but many didn't, that space gap is where there's so much energy and so much potential, and it's unlimited, that we just didn't understand it because there was nothing there. But in the nothing being there, it's everything. And so it's the same thing between the two hemispheres of your brain. You know, you've got this space gap and you have a soul that sits there. It is a black hole, it's a universe, it's a creation, it's the nano layer, it's the beauty of mankind that will experience the dimensions of a universal flow once it engages and taps into this field strength.
And you recall, Dean, when he showed us the universal cup, in the center was a nano-coated copper spring and a nano-coated zinc spring. And then he pointed to the between them and he said, this is where the emotions are created.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The emotion of man. And that, so this is...
so if
yeah,
you had no hands, you can accomplish the same.
Of course, yeah, of course. But we were talking about the physicality, but of course we're talking about the soul aspects and the brain. And yeah, they will come to a position where, as you rightly just said, that we won't need the physicality, and we can then come to a position where we can move to a new position. And then if we so say, if we require it in that environment, then we can have a physicality again once more if we desire to. But depending upon where you land, that may not be very conducive, because if you land in a certain position, as Mr. Kesh would say planet Zeus, for instance, then you may not need these particular particular limbs that we have. They wouldn't be very useful to you. Every position requires a different field strength and a different thought and a different field, and that may be in physicality or non-physicality, dependent upon your intentions and positioning in that very moment.
And you do recall, Dean, when Mr. Kesh was in China and they were creating this system for the spaceship to be created, we all practice sending plasma balls in that direction to where they were working. So we can do the same with the Linz exhibition. Keep this in your mind often, and send fields of plasma. It's good practice, and I think we can create these fields of peace and calmness and whatever this exhibition needs, and it'll give us an opportunity to practice that.
Yeah, of course, Mark. And then, of course, going further into that, and if you start practicing this and giving to that particular dome of peace, which is here to bring this beautiful peace to humanity. It's the core. It's the Caroline core that Mr. Kesh spoke about many years ago. And so this position then, it's a plasma, and if you feed this plasma, then it comes to a position where it will feed back. And so the more you give, the more you receive. So giving into this plasma, this core will bring about many different beauties and new conditions where the nano layering and the field strength will come back and feed back into your environment for you to experience even more, so that you can give even more. And then when you have a surplus, then you can feed that back again to another soul that requires or has a shortage, that they can receive the love and attention and care and the field strength that you have, that you can share and give to them. Thanks, Mark.
Very well.
Did you guys remember, used to be Mr. Kesh told about the old teaching? He used to tell us
about the what?
He used to tell us about ourselves. He used to say, "Oh, I'm not teaching anything at the end, you will find I teach about yourself. Did you remember those kinds of stuff? I think the
Yeah.
5 cup and everything is all about us. We are the reactor, and he's teaching about us, our soul, and our
Oh, yes,
body.
yes, absolutely. Yeah, we're using the matter state to reach the level of understanding of the soul of the man, which he said, your soul has a double PhD in all of this.
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
we're past midnight, and I don't know how these meetings seem to extend themselves for such a long time.
Because
Alex?
they're fantastic. They're totally gripping and engaging. And you look at the contributions from Selena Keaton and Dean. And, you know, there's another, as Patricia says, another 20 in the Spanish community that are hanging on to every word. I want to thank everybody. This is the North American Corona team, international team meeting on Sunday afternoon. And I really thank you for allowing me to present again today. And I'm really honored that you've all been here. And we've crossed the watershed and the future's bright. So get your sunglasses on and let's move forward. See you next week, guys. I'm going to hand it over to you, Mark. Thank you. You carry
Okay.
on.
Yes, thanks. Is there anything else anyone would like to say before we go to the little clip from the A Wish from the Universal Council? And of course, that small video that we play, and then the final disclaimer.
Hi, everyone. Only one thing I would like to bring here, just real quick.
Take your
Mr. Cash,
time. We love to hear from you, Jalal.
thank you, Mark. Mr. Cash speak in lately about the crisis which is coming about the economy and the high prices of the
Yes,
fuel and all of that. Today, you know, the 1 liter of fuel is going up about 4.5 kron in one day. And you know that what that
we
means?
don't understand what that means, Jalal. 4.5 chrome.
1 liter before it cost 15 kron. It's about $1.50,
Okay,
and now it's nearly $2.
so close to 30%.
Yes, 30%, yeah.
And it's a huge difference, you know, when you are working with the in the street and delivering and transport, and this will add a lot of to the goods.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe it's time to take the tires off the car and
In
start
Great
working.
Britain, you got no gas either.
You know, this is exactly when I came today. I wanted to ask the knowledge seeker here if they done anything with the plasma. You know, in the late times, we all ask the knowledge seekers to do things. Even Rick
Yes,
brought it up, and
yes.
we bring this all of the time that the
Yeah.
people do things.
And even Alex Jalal came into
Yes,
the
exactly.
question, and he opened his mic, he raised his hand. He didn't mean to, but then he said exactly what you're ready to say here, which is,
Do according to your knowledge, do according to your knowledge, and you will see that everyone will add to it, and you yourself, you will add to the others, but do things.
even if it's little things, we're not judging, right?
Even if it's a CO2 reactor, even if is it cup of the man, cup of the universe, the 5 cups, but do things.
And that's what
You know,
Alex said. He said, nobody's going to do it for you.
You know, it's amazing that Mr. Cash do not teach you how to be a god. Mr. Cash teach you that you are a God. You don't need anything more, but to recognize that you can do.
The only one
That's
that's going
all.
to save you is yourself.
Exactly.
I
So
talked to my friends in London this morning and they said there's not a problem with the fuel. The problem is the governments are forcing the truckers to take the vaccination shots and the truckers aren't doing it. So they've shut the trucking industry down.
All right, we're not going to talk about anything with the V in it.
you
Oh,
know what?
sorry, guys.
Okay,
Yeah,
you
I
know
know.
what?
I have a lot to say too, and it's bubbling, Randy.
But
So I know where you're
wait,
coming from.
wait. Let me tell you guys. For 2 days now in Sweden here, they opened everything. Everything is open.
Norway too?
It's as if they are shut down. No, but they are not. Everything is open. You can do whatever you want, as if 2 years before. So
Blessed are you. And Sweden.
yeah, you don't need someone to tell you what is your potential and what you can do. Really, go deep in yourself and do things. This is, and you know, this is only tools for you to see what is inside you. This is only a keys for you to move a little bit here and there. The hands, the ganses, the nano. You have more. You have more than that. Believe me.
Mark, there are several versions that in the United States they're destroying all the crops. Is that true?
I don't know. I'm not on a farm. But Mr. Kesh said a certain individual was buying up, and I have seen headlines where, and I didn't read the stories, but it said the farmers are destroying their crops. Maybe they're being paid to destroy them. I don't know.
Yes, that's it. They're being paid, and
I don't know.
if not, they
John.
won't get the subsidy next year.
Okay.
That is correct. They're being paid to grow grass. In England, it's over 400 pounds an acre or a hectare, I believe.
Okay.
So we'll be fed with grass then.
Well, grass is good for cattle, but they don't want you raising cattle either.
John, can you say moo?
Well, all depends what type of grass.
Yeah.
So we make
You got the
GANs.
cannabis grass there.
Don't we just make some GANs out of whatever happens to be there? Because it's
Oh.
going to be energy.
No,
Yes.
no. You don't make guns. Go above it. You are already done the guns. Go above that.
You just
Create a
need plasma water.
No. Think
Slow
more.
yourself. Slow
Think-
yourself.
Think
Go
big.
inside. Yeah.
If you want to work with the ganses, make a plasma. Make a plasma. Try to make the free plasma. What you doing with your hands? All of you now, all of you, you come across this teaching of the hands. What you are doing? Are you creating ganses? Are you creating plasma liquid water or what? You are making fields. It's the same thing. If you work with the ganses, try to make the fields. If you make liquid plasma water, try to make fields. How you make fields? The potential difference between the stronger and the weaker. This is how you make the fields. It's not that you are using the liquid water, or you wasn't using the ganses, or using the reactors, or using the coils. No, look to the fields, what is coming out, and how this field interact to make a new field. You know, remember the guns of the guns? It's always like, yes.
Can I quickly say something? So
No, you don't say anything. You know why?
Why is this, Jalal?
Oh, my dear, for 2 days, I didn't hear anything from you, as if you are not there.
Oh, Jalal have been so
He's
busy.
been working.
Yeah, yeah.
So one thing I will say, Jalal, is talking about creating. So we go beyond. We're creating from the fields. So we leave behind using the ganses and things. You produce the ganses. Work with the fields. Mr. Kesha said this many times, and I know that you have spoken about this many times, and trying to get everybody to understand working with the fields. And I know that can be difficult, but a very quick analogy would be with what's just been spoken about with the agriculture, would be the best gardeners, or on a smaller scale, but the best gardeners are always the ones that give love and care and wish for their plants to be beautiful, and give freely and unconditionally from themselves, and just love what they do. And those gardens flourish. And they don't use any different materials to the other gardeners, but their thoughts and intentions are field strengths that enhance the environment and give it the beauty for it to flourish. It's no different between the two hemispheres of your brain. Give it that field strength to produce the fields, the interaction.
And you
Thank you, Jalal.
mentioned the wish, Dean, and I was just going to bring something up, and please stay with us, Jalal, that Mr. Kesh said, if it's your, and now we know we're absorbing 80%, everyone is basically absorbing 80% of their energy every day from the fields of the environment. And Mr. Kesh said, if it's your wish to be fed by the fields of the universe, you will be fed.
I want to tell you a story. Do you have time?
Yes.
Yes. I have some experience about the wish, not really wish. It's like feelings. One time, my husband that time used to work in the nighttime. So I'm watching TV. He went to the work, so I'm watching TV, and there is a paid programming, the jewelry programming, right? So I'm watching those kinds of stuff. So suddenly one Bengal came into the skin. So I felt good. I don't like jewelry that much, but I was watching. I don't know why, but I felt very good when the Bengal came. The picture came. So I'm looking and drawing picture in the paper. Most of time when I watch TV or do something, I have a pen or paper. I try to draw or write. It's like automatic writing. So that day I was doing that. And then my husband came to the work in the morning time. And early in the morning, he say, "Oh, get ready." So I said, "Why?" "Let's go somewhere. Let's get ready." So I get ready. And he took me to the jewelry store and he bought me a bangle. It
Beautiful.
happened few times, not every time, but few times. When I realized when I plan to do something, it doesn't happen. But suddenly when it comes from the heart, good feelings, and it happened without asking.
Just like the jumper and the wish.
Yes. Yeah, it's happened. I am the proof. So I think so. We'll find something for ourselves, for our future.
No worries.
Yes.
And as he said, the fear basically paralyzes us. So let's avoid that as much as possible.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Selena. Anyone else before we wrap it up for today?
Well, I would just like to thank everybody Mark, Alex, Jalal, and everybody else for permitting us to be in your workshop. And we're following you, Alex. We're never gonna let you go. So it's been really, especially the last part of the meeting was really nice, and we thank you for all your sharing. And see you next week.
I'll make sure to stay between the ditches.
You may have your own spaceship along with Jalal, so you can teach along the way, Alex. Jalal.
Oh, do they have two-seaters?
Oh, no, they have 1,000 seaters.
Thanks, Patricia. Thanks, Jalal.
Thank you, Alex. But don't forget, guys, I am saying here.
Your physicality may be here, but your soul is going to be riding along with us.
I don't know. Mr. Cash said, no, you are bended to go there. To go, you stay here. He knows. If I go there, I will never come here back.
Right. Okay. Well, we're going to do both. We're going to become these chameleons of the universe, back and forth. We're going to bring back knowledge, and we're going to share it on this planet as well from some of the perhaps more advanced civilizations, or even a civilization that has some different ways of doing things and that could improve our ways here. So I think the whole universal community is going to start working together and sharing once we get our feet on the ground, so to speak. Okay, is it time to wrap it up? Or was someone holding a thought that they wanted to share, but it hasn't come out? Feel free. We want to thank Mr. Kesh for providing everything we need, including this platform. And, thank everyone for participating. Even if you didn't speak, you've contributed massively to this meeting with your field strength.
Just one thing, Mark. Today I was teaching someone here, and he's the first time knowing about the plasma. I said, and he watched the amino acid, and he said, look, I make a magnet for this amino acid to be here. He said, this amino acid, from where it came? I said, this is from universe, from universe, from everywhere outside this earth. And you know what the beauty, what he said? He said, okay, there is a lot of materials in earth. So do the same thing. I said, exactly. The same materials, what we are making here, there is the same materials is outside in the earth, and they are mimicking the same magnet to capture and to bring in the amino acid, which is create everything here. And then he said, okay, if amino acid is here and created, from where it came? I said, from the universe, from the black hole. I said, in the black hole there is amino acid? I said, yes, 100%, because it's the same system all over the place. I said, is there a human outside there? I said, if you figure this one just in 5 minutes, you said, it needs a lot of awareness when he telling you, okay, there's a lot of materials outside in earth, do that, mimic the same thing what you are doing here. He said, we are exactly doing the same. We are mimicking the same condition what earth makes, the materials makes outside, and we are making it here in this glass or in this jar. So he said, okay.
Very nice teaching.
Yeah, really, it was very beautiful, open-minded. So it's the same thing, guys. Please think about the fields. It is the creator of everything. So even when you work with the matter state, whatever matter state it is, you are making a magnet for whatever you want. Thank you.